I had never believed in ghosts, spirits, or the supernatural, unlike many around me. To me, those were just products of imagination, stories crafted to scare or intrigue. But in the autumn of 2012, when I was a junior history major at Boston University, everything changed. And I must recount this story to warn others. Never play with what you don't understand. It was a late weekend evening, the air crisp and cold, the dim yellow street lamps flickering weakly through the old dorm window. My friends and I gathered for a relaxed night, or so we thought. Sarah, a classmate obsessed with all things supernatural, suggested we try a Ouija board game. It's just a game, to feel some thrills, you know, she said with sparkling eyes. Mark, my closest friend, always up for jokes and challenges, chimed in. I heard it's pretty creepy, but it's just a game. Who's brave enough? Lily, the shy, quiet one, only nodded softly, while James, an art student and horror movie fanatic, laughed. Let's do it. How else will we know? We decided to play in an abandoned classroom on the second floor of the art building near the dorm. The room was unused for years, thick with dust, cracked walls, and a heavy musty smell. We brought an old Ouija board Sarah recently bought online, tarot cards, and some candles to set the mood. We all thought it was just harmless fun after a stressful week. Entering the room, the cold, gloomy atmosphere gave me a chill, but everyone tried to act casual, joking to dispel the uneasy feeling. We placed the Ouija board on the creaky wooden table, sitting in a circle. Sarah lit the candles, their flickering light dancing on the cracked walls. Everyone placed their fingers lightly on the small pointer of the Ouija board, following Sarah's instructions. Okay, let's start, she said. Ask a simple question. Who wants to go first? Mark spoke up. Is anyone here? The pointer began moving slowly, as if pushed by an invisible force, gradually sliding to the word yes. Everyone laughed it off. Must be the wind, James joked. But I noticed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. We continued asking simple questions at first, easy to guess, like what is your name, or are you a good spirit? The pointer moved smoothly, answering clearly, but some questions stunned us. The pointer answered things none of us knew, even secrets only a few were aware of. The atmosphere grew heavier. I felt the shift. Sarah looked at me, her eyes more serious than usual. Maybe we're not just playing a game anymore. The moment the pointer slid over the word yes, a strange silence fell across the room. What was meant to be a prank suddenly felt weighty, as if an unseen presence had stepped in among us. All right, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Let's ask something else. We all placed our fingers on the pointer again. This time, James asked, in a shaky voice, what is your name? The pointer moved deliberately, spelling out a name none of us recognized, Emma or Raya. No one spoke for a moment. I glanced around the circle, catching worried glances exchanged between Mark and Lily. Sarah, however, looked captivated, leaning closer. Maybe it's the spirit of this building, she murmured, or someone connected to this room. I tried to shake off the chill creeping up my spine. It was easy to laugh it off, but a part of me felt unsettled. We kept asking questions, simple, harmless questions. The pointer responded with eerie accuracy. Are you friendly? Mark asked. Why yes. Do you want us to leave? No. The pointer hovered, then moved firmly to stay. The room felt colder, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows on the cracked walls. A faint smell of damp earth seemed to seep from the corners. Suddenly, the pointer started moving on its own. Faster this time, spelling out a chilling message. You should not be here. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. We all froze, our fingers lingering awkwardly on the pointer. Let's stop, Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, eyes wide with fear. But before we could lift our hands, the pointer darted rapidly across the board, spelling, leave or suffer. A heavy silence followed. Then, Lily's breath hitched, and she began to cry softly, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong, Lily? Sarah asked, concern growing in her voice. But Lily didn't answer. Instead, her voice shifted low, rough, and unfamiliar. Get out, now. The room's temperature dropped drastically. I could see our breath misting in the air. Mark jumped up, knocking over a candle. Flames licked the cracked wall, casting grotesque shadows. Enough of this, he shouted. We're done. We quickly removed our hands, extinguished the candles, and fled the room. Outside, the normal noises of the campus seemed impossibly loud. Footsteps, distant laughter, the hum of traffic. But inside me, the unease lingered. I could not forget the words spelled out on the board, or Lily's strange voice. Over the next few days, none of us wanted to talk about that night. But the experience clung to us, dark and persistent. Sarah became obsessed, researching the history of the building. She discovered that the art classroom was once the site of a tragic accident. A young woman named Maria, a student, had died there decades ago, under mysterious circumstances. Lily, meanwhile, started to change. She was quieter, withdrawn, and sometimes spoke in voices that were not her own. Mark joked to hide his fear, but I could see the shadows under his eyes growing deeper. One night, I awoke to find Lily standing at the foot of my bed, eyes black as coal. She whispered in a voice that wasn't hers, "You shouldn't have stayed." I jolted awake, heart pounding. The shadows in my room seemed to twist and writhe like living things. The game had begun, and we had no idea what we had unleashed. Days after that night in the abandoned classroom felt like walking through a thick fog. Everything was muted, distorted, and tinged with dread. What we had thought was just a harmless prank was no longer just a game. Lily was the first to show signs that something was terribly wrong. It started subtly. She would stare blankly at walls, not responding to our calls. Her laughter turned brittle and hollow. Sometimes, when no one else was around, I could hear her whispering to herself, in a voice that didn't belong to her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we were gathered at Sarah's dorm room trying to piece together what was happening. The air was heavy, and the only light came from a flickering desk lamp. Suddenly, Lily burst into tears, her body trembling violently. Then, her voice changed. It deepened, rough and guttural. "Leave, now, or suffer," she growled, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. We all jumped back, frozen in place. It was as if a different entity had taken over her body. Sarah rushed to her side, trying to comfort her, but Lily pushed her away with unnatural strength. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadowy figures lurking just beyond the edges of my vision, whispering my name in chilling tones. The next day, Sarah came to me with a thick book she'd borrowed from the university library. Old local folklore and accounts of haunted places in Boston. She told me about restless spirits, about how certain places could trap souls, how some entities could possess the living. "We have to help Lily," she said, "but I don't know if we're prepared for what that might mean." Our group grew, tense, wary of one another. James, once the skeptic, confessed he had heard strange noises in his apartment, footsteps pacing at midnight, knocks on the walls, and shadowy figures glimpsed from the corner of his eyes. Mark avoided talking about the night entirely, but I could see his hands trembling when he thought no one was watching. One night, we gathered again, this time not for fun, but to confront what we had unleashed. We set up candles, crossed our fingers, and cautiously placed our hands back on the Ouija board. The room was silent, except for the faint crackling of the flames. The pointer moved almost instantly, spelling words with terrifying clarity. "We are here." Then, "You disturbed us." The pointer circled frantically, as if angry. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. Our breaths formed clouds in the air. The candles flickered wildly and then went out, plunging us into darkness. A low growl echoed from the corners of the room. The faint outline of a shadow coalesced near the wall, shifting and twisting. Lily screamed, not her voice, but a voice that was deep and chilling. "You will pay." We fled the room in terror, but the feeling of being watched, hunted, clung to us like a dark cloak. In the days that followed, Lily was hospitalized for unexplained convulsions. The doctors found no physical cause. Sarah arranged for a spiritual healer, a woman who claimed to communicate with restless spirits. The healer told us that the spirit we contacted was not at rest. It was bound by pain and anger, a presence that wanted to be free, but also wanted revenge. We were warned that meddling further could bring more harm, but we had already crossed the line. Our lives were no longer our own. The aftermath of that dreadful night was like waking up trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end. What had started as a silly game quickly unraveled into a nightmare that clawed at our sanity and physical well-being. The day after Lily was admitted to the hospital, the group barely held itself together. Her face was pale and drawn, and though the doctors ruled out any physical illness, it was clear something was terribly wrong. Sarah, overwhelmed and desperate, spent hours scouring old archives and university records, trying to find any clues. about the spirit named Maria that we had contacted. Mark and James avoided talking about the experience, burying themselves in their studies or distractions, but the fear in their eyes betrayed their calm facades. For me, sleep became a stranger. Night after night, I was haunted by vivid nightmares, visions of dark, twisted hallways, cold hands gripping my arms, whispers in a language I couldn't understand. One night, as I sat alone in my dorm room, the lights flickered violently before plunging the room into darkness. A cold breeze brushed past me, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic. Like old blood, I heard a faint voice whisper my name, drawing me toward the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I forced myself to turn on my phone's flashlight, but the room was empty. Lily's condition worsened in the following days. She would wake up screaming, her eyes wide with terror, muttering incoherent phrases that sent chills down our spines. The healer Sarah found came to the hospital. She performed rituals, burning herbs, chanting prayers, and trying to communicate with whatever force was tormenting Lily. After one session, Lily suddenly calmed, but the healer warned us, the spirit is restless. It has been disturbed, and it will not leave his. Meanwhile, strange incidents began to plague the rest of us. Mark's apartment was vandalized overnight, walls scratched with symbols no one could recognize. James found cryptic messages etched into his mirror, appearing and disappearing like smoke. Sarah reported seeing shadowy figures lurking outside her window late at night. We were trapped in a nightmare of our own making, and no one seemed able to help. One evening, the four of us gathered at Sarah's apartment to discuss what to do next. We have to end this, Sarah insisted. But how? We don't even know what we're dealing with. James shook his head. I don't want to believe this is real, but it's happening. Mark, pale and tense, added, we should have never touched that board. I looked around at their haunted faces, realizing we were in deeper than any of us had imagined. And then Lily's voice came through the phone from the hospital, flat and unfamiliar. You can't escape. The line went dead. Fear settled over us like a thick fog. We knew our lives had changed forever. The days after Lily's hospitalization became a slow descent into madness for all of us. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, and each night brought horrors none of us could have imagined. Lily's room in the hospital was suffocatingly cold, the kind of cold that seemed to seep into your bones. Even with layers of blankets, she trembled incessantly. At times her eyes would snap open suddenly, glowing faintly in the dim light, her voice dropping into that deep, guttural tone that chilled me to the core. She's trapped, the spiritual healer told us. One evening, this spirit is bound by rage and sorrow. To free her, we must understand its pain. Meanwhile, each of us suffered from relentless nightmares. I saw shadowy figures with hollow eyes reaching out from dark corners, whispering my name, promising torment. Mark dreamt of being chased through endless, twisting hallways, always hearing footsteps behind him, but never seeing who or what followed. Sarah's dreams were filled with faces she didn't recognize, eyes bleeding black tears. James awoke, screaming after visions of his own reflection melting away into darkness. One night, Sarah found an old diary hidden in the university archives, written by a young woman named Maria who had studied art in the same building decades earlier. The diary chronicled Maria's despair, her struggles with depression, and her mysterious disappearance never explained, never solved. We realized the spirit was Maria, desperate for release but bound by unresolved pain. The healer organized several seances trying to communicate directly with Maria's spirit. During one intense session, Lily's body convulsed violently as the spirit fought for control. Voices echoed through the room, alternating between pleas for mercy and terrifying threats. The air thickened, and objects began to move on their own. We were caught in a battle between the living and the dead. Despite the healer's efforts, the possession worsened. Lily's personality flickered moments of lucidity, shattered by bouts of rage and despair. Her family considered transferring her to a psychiatric hospital, but we knew this was no ordinary illness. One night, I sat by Lily's bedside, holding her trembling hand. Her eyes opened slowly. For a fleeting moment, I saw the girl I knew, the scared, gentle Lily, before her gaze darkened again. "Help me," she whispered, voice breaking. We had to find a way to put Maria's spirit to rest. But the longer we stayed entangled with this dark presence, the more we realized the danger was far from over. After the terrifying spiritual battles, we realized that to save Lily and ourselves, we had to uncover the dark history behind the room and the spirit that haunted us. Sarah and I spent hours digging through old university archives, dusty records, and faded newspaper clippings. The truth slowly emerged, painting a grim picture. Decades ago, the art building's abandoned classroom was a place of tragedy. A student named Maria Ellis, brilliant but troubled, had vanished without explanation in the fall of 1967. Her disappearance was shrouded in mystery. Some whispered she'd been involved in occult rituals. Others claimed she was driven mad by a secret no one dared speak of. One chilling article detailed a police investigation where Maria was last seen performing a Ouija session alone. Desperate to contact her deceased mother, witnesses reported strange lights and screams coming from the building that night. Maria was never found. The room had been closed off soon after, left to rot and be forgotten. But clearly, something had never left. As we learned more, strange occurrences escalated. At night, the air around Sarah's apartment grew thick and suffocating. Shadows danced at the edges of our vision. Doors slammed shut on their own. Phones emitted static-filled voices that no one could decipher. One evening, we returned to the abandoned classroom, determined to confront whatever lingered. Equipped with candles, recording devices, and the healer's amulets, we stepped inside. The decaying room, the silence was oppressive. Placing the Ouija board on the table, we joined hands once more. The pointer jerked wildly, spelling, "Why do you disturb me?" Sarah asked, voice steady but trembling. "Maria, what do you want?" "From us." The pointer moved slowly. "To be free, to be heard, to end the pain." Suddenly, the room's temperature plunged. Our breaths fogged the air. A deep, mournful wail echoed from the walls, vibrating the floor beneath our feet. Without warning, Lily's body convulsed violently. Her eyes flashed black as the spirit surged, roaring in rage and sorrow. The healer began chanting, waving herbs and talismans, trying to hold the spirit back. The shadowy figure of Maria appeared, a silhouette, flickering like a candle flame, face twisted in anguish. She pointed accusingly at the room, then at us. "We desecrated her suffering," Sarah whispered. "We woke something better left asleep." The spirit unleashed a wave of cold, pushing us back. Objects flew off shelves. The candles blew out, plunging us into darkness. We staggered out of the room, gasping for air, our hearts pounding. But in the midst of terror, we realized what Maria needed was acknowledgement, a way to tell her story, to find peace. We vowed to uncover every detail of her life, to help her finally rest. But the spirit's anger warned us. The path ahead would be perilous, and some truths were better left buried. We had uncovered Maria's tragic story, but knowing it didn't mean we were free. The spirit's wrath was far from quenched. In fact, it felt like the more we tried to help, the stronger it became. The weeks that followed were the darkest time of our lives. Lily's condition slowly improved, but scars remained. Her mind fractured, her soul haunted. She was never the same again. Sarah and Mark decided to leave Boston, desperate to escape the nightmare. James withdrew completely, his once bright eyes now hollow and haunted. I stayed behind, driven by a mix of guilt and determination. One night, I returned to the old classroom alone, carrying Maria's diary and a candle. The room was silent, but I felt eyes on me, cold, accusing. I lit the candle and read aloud the last pages of the diary, Maria's final words, a plea for forgiveness and peace. The air grew still. For a moment, I thought I saw a faint smile flicker across the shadowed corner. But then, the Ouija board's pointer began moving by itself. Slowly, it spelled, "You can't leave." The door slammed shut. The candle flickered and died. I was plunged into darkness. Voices whispered from all directions, angry, desperate, sorrowful. The walls seemed to close in. I stumbled forward, heart pounding, breath ragged. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped my wrist. "Why do you stay?" A voice echoed in my mind. "Why do you not run?" I didn't have an answer. Days later, my friends found me wandering near the old building, pale and disoriented. I told them the truth. The spirit would not let me go. The university sealed off the classroom permanently. Lily's family moved her away for long-term care. And me, I carry this story as a warning. Do not play with things you do not understand. Do not summon forces that do not wish to be disturbed, because some games do not end, and some spirits never rest. It's been years since that night, Years since the game that changed my life forever. I tell you this not to scare you, but to warn you. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. I've tried to move on, to bury the past deep inside me, but shadows lurk just beyond the edges of my vision, whispering reminders that some things do not forgive. The Ouija board, it's locked away in a box, buried in the back of my closet. But sometimes, when the room is still, I feel it calling, a faint tapping, a soft scratching, like a voice begging to be heard. I asked myself why we were chosen to encounter this darkness. Was it curiosity, foolishness, or fate? What I know now is simple. There are forces beyond us, ancient, restless, and merciless. They do not welcome visitors, so if you ever come across a Ouija board, or hear whispers in the dead of night, or see shadows flicker where there should be none, remember my story. Do not touch. Do not ask. Don't. Whatever you do, do not play the game, because once you start, there may be no turning back. They found the nurse's body in the elevator shaft, 12 floors below, her face frozen in a scream she never had time to finish. There was no blood, no broken bones, just that expression, raw terror-like. She'd seen something that tore the sanity right out of her. The police sealed off the hospital and called it an accident. The city called it bad luck. But the people who worked the night shift whispered the same thing. It happened again. Halewood Medical Center wasn't supposed to be open. The main building had been abandoned for nearly 40 years after a fire gutted its east wing and claimed 27 lives, patients, doctors, and children from the pediatric ward. But a skeleton crew still staffed the emergency section for legal reasons, and that meant someone had to patrol the old floors at night. Claire Thompson didn't believe in ghosts. She took the job for the paycheck. 12 hours later, she would see something in the dark that made her pray for the same death as the nurse. In the elevator shaft, rain swept across the small town of Fairview in thin, cold sheets. Claire Thompson parked her Corolla in the half-empty lot of St. Mary's Medical Center and sat for a moment, staring at the building. The hospital's brick walls were weather-stained, its upper windows dark except for one, where a faint light flickered. Above the entrance, the faded sign swayed slightly in the wind, creaking like a loose hinge. She stepped out, pulling her coat tighter. The air smelled of wet asphalt, disinfectant, and something metallic beneath it. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A lone vending machine blinked in the corner, its hum filling the empty lobby. Claire Thompson, the receptionist, Marjorie, according to her tag, stood behind the desk, smiling faintly. "You're on Ward B and the old wing tonight. Old wing's closed, but you'll need to check it during rounds." Claire signed the forms, the metal keys cold in her palm. Marjorie led her down a corridor where the air grew cooler. To the left, the main ward glowed warmly. To the right stretched a dim hallway. "That's the old wing," Marjorie said. "You'll hear stories. Ignore them. And if you hear voices or footsteps, sound carries strangely here at night." By 11 p.m., Claire settled in, checking patients, updating charts, sharing coffee with Ethan, the quiet night guard. At 3 a.m., she decided to make her first round through the old wing. The corridor was colder. The walls a faded green, paint bubbled in spots. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally. Passing room 204, she noticed a reddish-brown smear outside the door. She reached room 206. The door was shut. The small glass window showed only darkness. The key in her pocket felt heavier, but she moved on. At the nurse's station, dust coated the counters, old memos curling on the corkboard. Turning back, she saw movement in the glass ahead, a tall figure at the far end of the hall. She froze. Lifting her flashlight, the beam sliced the dark. The hallway was empty. Claire walked toward the main ward, forcing her steps steady. Behind her, the echo of her footsteps followed, perfectly intimate until one more step landed after hers. She didn't look back. The old wing smelled different. Claire noticed it the moment she stepped in for her second night shift, something sharper than the faint mildew she'd smelled before, almost like the air inside a closet that had been sealed for years. The hallway lights here were dim and uneven, some buzzing, others dead entirely. Her flashlight beam cut through the shadows, picking out the warped linoleum and patches of peeling paint. She started with room 201 empty, save for an overturned chair in the corner. The windows were bolted shut, glass clouded by years of grime. Room after room, she found the same: abandoned beds, scattered papers, forgotten medical equipment. Dust lay thick on everything, muffling even the sound of her footsteps. At room 206, she stopped. The door was shut tight, the small wired glass window opaque with dirt. She shone her light inside but saw nothing. The doorknob felt colder than the surrounding air. She told herself she was imagining it and kept walking. At the end of the corridor, she found the nurse's station. Old binders slumped on sagging shelves. A corkboard still held yellowed memos from the 1970s, medication schedules, handwritten notes, and one typewritten incident report about unusual patient behavior. The last line was blacked out with a thick marker. She was flipping through one of the binders when a sound came from behind her, a faint scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. She turned sharply, flashlight beam sweeping the hallway. Nothing moved. The sound came again, closer this time. Claire stepped into the corridor, her shoes crunching on something brittle, fragments of glass. She didn't remember seeing them before. The scraping stopped. Silence pressed in around her, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. She was halfway back toward Ward B when she noticed the smear just outside room 204. A fresh reddish-brown streak curved across the floor toward the wall. She crouched to examine it. The smell was faint but unmistakable iron. Her radio crackled in her pocket, making her jump. "Everything okay down there?" Ethan's voice came through, distorted by static. She hesitated before answering. "Yeah, just checking rooms." Static hissed again, but she could have sworn she heard another voice layered beneath Ethan's, a whisper, too faint to make out. By the time she reached the main ward, her skin felt cold all over. She told herself it was just the air down there. She couldn't shake the feeling that something in the old wing had started paying attention to her. It was 1:43 a.m. when the sound came. Claire was at the nurse's desk in Ward B, updating a chart, when the ceiling speaker above her crackled. Static. Then, a voice, small, shaky, unmistakably that of a child. "Help me, I can't breathe." The pen slipped from her hand. She stared up at the speaker, the sound freezing her in place. The voice came again, weaker this time. "Please, it's cold." Claire grabbed her radio. "Ethan, did you hear that?" "No, hear what?" His tone was calm but edged with suspicion. The intercom there was a kid's voice asking for help. There was a pause. Then Ethan said, "Claire, the intercom in the old wing hasn't worked since the 80s. It's not even connected." Her pulse kicked up. "I'm going down there." "Not alone," Ethan said quickly. "I'll meet you at the juncture." By the time they met, the voice had gone silent. Together they walked into the old wing, their flashlights slicing through the gloom. The hallway was dead quiet, except for the faint drip of water somewhere in the distance. They stopped at the small intercom box mounted on the wall near room 208. Its metal surface was rusted, the speaker grill bent inward. "No power," Ethan muttered, tapping it. The device hung loosely, wires dangling inside. "See, completely dead." Claire's flashlight beam drifted toward the floor. There was something there, small, pale, almost hidden in the dust. She crouched. It was a shoe, a child's shoe, scuffed and worn, the kind with a faded cartoon print. Ethan frowned. This ward was psych, patients only, no children. Claire didn't answer. She was staring at the door to room 210, ajar by an inch, though she remembered it being closed last night. She stepped forward, pushing it open. The beam of her flashlight swept over a bare room, metal bed frame, overturned stool, peeling wallpaper, and then movement in the far corner. JOC froze. Something was there, crouched low, its outline barely visible. "Hello." Her voice came out more breath than sound. The shape lifted its head. For a split second, she thought she saw a pale face, eyes too large. Before the light flickered and it was gone. Just empty wall. Ethan touched her arm. "Let's go." Back in the main ward, Claire couldn't stop thinking about that voice. She went to the old records room on the 3rd floor, where boxes of yellowed files lined the shelves. Hours later, she found it, a newspaper clipping from June 12, 1980. Hospital fire claims. 9 lives, subheading. Victims were psychiatric patients. Under investigation, the article listed names, mostly adults, but near the bottom, one stood out. Sarah L., age 8, cause of death, smoke inhalation. There was no explanation for what an 8-year-old had been doing in the old wing. Claire sat back, the air suddenly heavy in the room. Somewhere deep in the building, a faint crackle of static drifted through the walls, and just before it faded, so soft she almost thought she imagined it, came the whisper, "Claire." Ethan was waiting for her in the small security office, a cramped room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dust. The wall was lined with 6 flickering monitors, each showing a different corner of the hospital. "You need to see this," he said, rewinding the tape from the night before. Claire leaned in. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 1:43 a.m. the exact time she'd heard the voice over the intercom. On the screen, the camera in the old wing hallway showed nothing at first, just the long, dim corridor, debris scattered across the floor. Then, at the far end of the hall, a shadow moved. It wasn't the shadow of a person. It was thin, elongated, its shape stretching unnaturally, as if the light itself was bending. The figure stopped near room 210, exactly where she had seen the crouched shape. Slowly, its head tilted toward the camera. The pixels scrambled for a moment, distorting the image into a mess of static dot. When the picture cleared, the hallway was empty again. "That's impossible," Claire whispered. "Wait," Ethan said. Scrubbing forward a few seconds, the figure appeared again, this time closer to the lens, as if it had jumped forward in space. The face was pale, featureless, and yet the darkness around where its eyes should be seemed to look back at them. Claire felt her stomach tighten. Ethan paused the frame. "This was right after you said you heard the voice. Whatever it is, it knows you're here." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. One of the other monitors, camera 3, covering the stairwell, flickered suddenly. On the screen, a small shape darted past the bottom of the stairs. A child. It was quick, almost too quick to see. But Claire caught the outline. Short hair, white hospital gown, bare feet. "Rewind," she said sharply. They watched again, slower this time. The child stopped at the base of the stairs and looked up straight into the camera. Her lips moved, but there was no sound. The image glitched, and the frame repeated, over and over, as if stuck. Ethan tapped the screen. "This isn't possible. Those cameras are hardwired. No interference." A sudden click broke the silence. It came from the intercom speaker in the corner of the security office. Static. Then that same small, trembling voice. "Don't let him find me." Claire's skin prickled. "Who?" she whispered, as if the voice could hear. The reply was a long, shuddering breath. Then bang! A deafening sound from somewhere down the hall, like a door slamming shut. Ethan grabbed his flashlight. "We're checking it out." They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the deserted corridor. The sound had come from near the old pediatric ward, a place neither of them had reason to enter. The door to the ward was ajar. Inside, moonlight filtered through cracked windows, illuminating rows of small, empty beds. A mobile of faded paper stars hung from the ceiling, swaying gently though the air was still. On one bed lay a VHS tape. Claire picked it up. There was no label, just black plastic with a strip of dust. Back in the security office, they popped it into the old player. The screen showed shaky, handheld footage. A man's voice muttered in the background, too low to make out. The camera panned across the same pediatric ward they had just visited, but this was decades earlier. The beds were occupied by children in hospital gowns, some sitting up, others lying still. The cameraman stopped at one bed where a little girl sat cross-legged, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She looked directly into the lens. It was the same girl from the stairwell footage. The girl opened her mouth to speak, and the tape cut to black. The hospital's basement was never part of Claire's duties. On her first night, Ethan had warned her, "If you value your sleep, stay away from there." Tonight, that warning felt more like an invitation. The VHS tape still lay on the desk, its blank face catching the flicker of the monitors. Claire couldn't stop replaying the girl's voice in her head. "Don't let him find me." "Where does the stairwell lead after the old wing?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. "Down to the boiler room, storage, and the morgue, but it's all sealed off." "Then why is there fresh dust on the handle?" she said quietly, pointing at the grainy live feed from camera 6. It showed the basement access door slightly ajar. Ethan sighed, grabbing a ring of keys. "Fine, but if we hear anything we leave," she finished for him. The stairwell smelled of rust and wet concrete. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, each sound bouncing back distorted, as if the space below was swallowing it. At the bottom, the hallway split in two, one direction toward the boiler room, the other toward the old morgue. The walls here were lined with chipped white tiles, smeared with something dark, blood, Claire whispered. Ethan crouched, running a gloved finger across the stain. No rust, I think, but his voice lacked conviction. From deeper in the morgue hallway came a faint sound, not footsteps, more like dragging, slow, deliberate. Claire's pulse quickened. Someone's down here. They followed the sound until they reached a set of heavy metal doors. One hung slightly open, revealing the morgue beyond. Rows of empty gurneys, cold drawers lining the walls, and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry insect. In the center of the room stood a figure. At first, Claire thought it was a mannequin, tall, thin, dressed in a filthy white coat. Then it turned its head, and she saw its eyes, two bottomless black pits. Ethan's flashlight stuttered as the bulb dimmed. The figure tilted its head, mimicking the movement Claire had seen on the security footage. She couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. The figure raised one skeletal hand and pointed, not at them, but at one of the cold drawers along the wall. Without knowing why, Claire stepped forward. Her fingers shook as she gripped the handle and slid the drawer open. Inside lay a small body wrapped in a child-sized hospital gown. The skin was pale, lips blue. In one stiff hand was a stuffed rabbit. Claire's throat tightened. It was the girl from the tape. Her eyes snapped open. The scream that followed wasn't human. It was layered, one voice of a child, another of something ancient and furious, tearing through the air like broken glass. The figure in the coat dissolved into shadow, swirling around the room and plunging it into near darkness. Claire grabbed Ethan's arm. Run. They stumbled back into the hallway, the sound of dragging now behind them. Faster, closer. Something cold brushed Claire's shoulder-thin fingers, almost weightless but burning against her skin. They reached the stairwell and slammed the door shut, Ethan jamming a metal rod through the handle. For a moment, the basement was silent. Then came a pounding, slow and deliberate, as if whatever was down there knew the door wouldn't hold forever. Back in the security office, both of them were shaking. The monitors were alive with static, except for camera 6, the basement feed. On the screen, the door they had just locked stood still. Then, slowly, it opened by itself. The girl stepped out, holding her stuffed rabbit. She looked up into the camera, her lips moving again. Claire leaned in, reading the silent words. "He's coming for you next." The feed cut to black. The pounding from the basement door still echoed in Claire's head, though they were back in the security office. Ethan was pacing, muttering under his breath. His hands trembled as he flipped through the logbook, scanning for anything unusual. "We can't just sit here waiting for it to come upstairs," Claire said, her voice low but steady. Ethan stopped pacing. "If we want answers, we need to check the records room. Old files, patient histories, everything the administration buried when they shut the old wing down." The records room was down the west corridor, past the row of unused offices. Most were empty, but one door caught Claire's attention, painted dark green, with a peeling sign that read "Interrogation Room 2. "This isn't on the floor map," she said. "It's not supposed to be. That room was used decades ago, before the hospital changed hands, not for patients, for questioning staff when something went wrong." Ethan replied, glancing at it warily. The door was locked, but Ethan's keys made short work of it. Inside, the air was stale and cold. A single table stood in the center, bolted to the floor. Two metal chairs faced each other. The walls were lined with faded soundproofing panels, some torn to reveal dark stains beneath. A single flickering light bulb swung overhead. In the far corner sat a filing cabinet, dented and rusted. Claire pulled it open, and the smell of mildew hit her. Inside were folders, each stamped with the same word in red, "Confidential." She pulled one free. Inside were grainy black and white photographs, not of patients, but of staff, doctors, nurses, janitors. Some looked terrified, others vacant. On the back of each was a name and a date. The earliest photo was dated 1973, the latest to 1998. Ethan took another folder. His face went pale. "Claire, look at this." The photo he held showed the tall, thin man in the white coat they had seen in the morgue. His eyes were the same black voids, even in the old print. The name beneath read, "Dr. Harold Grayson." "Who is he?" Claire asked. Ethan skimmed the accompanying report. "Head surgeon, accused of dozens of disappearances inside the hospital. Patients, staff, even children from the pediatric ward. Never convicted. Officially, he resigned and left the city. But the investigation notes say there was no record of him anywhere after that. Claire flipped to the last page. There was a handwritten note in shaky script. "He works at night. He knows the walls better than anyone. He will never leave." A sound broke the silence, a faint click. The light bulb above them swayed harder. Though the air was still, Claire turned toward the doorway. A shadow stood there, taller than the frame itself. Dr. Grayson stepped inside, silent, his face half hidden in darkness. His white coat was torn and streaked with something black. In his hand, he held a scalpel, the blade catching the flicker of the bulb. Ethan's hand went for his flashlight, but it sputtered and died. Grayson's head tilted slowly, just like before, and the air in the room seemed to thicken. Claire's breath came shallow. She could hear something faint under the electric hum of the light. Whispers, hundreds of them, overlapping, coming from the walls themselves. The whispers grew louder, forming words. "Don't let him take you downstairs." Grayson took a step forward. Claire's survival instincts kicked in. She grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it toward him. The metal leg scraped across the floor, but when it struck him, it passed through. As if hitting smoke, Ethan yanked her toward the door. They stumbled into the hallway, but the lights there were already dimming in sequence, each one going out as though chasing them. They ran until they reached the records room. Ethan slammed the door and wedged a chair under the handle. In the corner of the records room was an old reel-to-reel recorder, the kind used decades ago. It was already spinning, though no one had touched it. A child's voice came through the speakers. It was the girl again. "He doesn't like this room. He can't hear us here. Find my name." Claire and Ethan began rifling through stacks of dusty folders, tossing aside irrelevant files. Claire's hands finally froze on one, a thin folder with no official markings. Inside was a single page, a pediatric admission form. Name: Emily Carter, age 9. Status: deceased. Cause of death: listed as cardiac arrest. Date: the same night Dr. Harold Grayson vanished. On the back of the page was a crude drawing of the hospital, done in a child's shaky hand. One area of the basement was circled in red crayon. Beside it, in childish letters, "My room." Claire looked up at Ethan. "She's not just a random ghost. She was one of his victims." The recorder clicked off. By itself, from the hallway came a faint sound. Not footsteps this time, the slow, metallic drag of a scalpel across the wall. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. "He's found us again." The scraping outside the records room stopped as suddenly as it began. Claire and Ethan stood, frozen, listening. The silence was worse than the sound. It meant he was waiting. Claire's grip tightened on the folder. "The map she drew. It's in the basement. We have to go." Ethan shook his head. "That's exactly where he wants us. She's trying to help. She saved us in the morgue, in the interrogation room. If we ignore her, we're not getting out of here." The decision came down to movement or waiting for the thing to come through the door. They chose movement. Ethan pushed the chair away and opened the door to a hallway swallowed by shadows. The emergency lights barely lit the path. They retraced their steps toward the basement stairs, each step echoing against the walls. When they reached the stairwell, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere itself was pressing them downward. The steps groaned under their weight as they descended. The basement was different now. The corridor seemed longer, the walls closer. Moisture dripped from overhead pipes, and the smell of rust and something fouler clung to the air. They followed the crude map from Emily's file, passing the morgue without looking inside. Every so often, Claire swore she saw movement at the edge of the dim light. Not footsteps this time, more like someone leaning just beyond her vision. Watching. At the end of the corridor stood a door unlike the others. Its surface was deep crimson. The paint bubbled and cracked. No handle, just a single keyhole. Ethan searched his ring of keys, finding one small and blackened with age. The metal felt unnaturally cold. He inserted it into the lock, and the door clicked open. Inside, the walls were painted the same deep red, but not with paint. The room was small, barely large enough for the single iron bed in the center. Restraint straps hung loosely from the bed frame. Chains bolted to the floor rattled softly, though no one had touched them. In one corner sat a child's wooden chair. On it was a doll missing one eye, its porcelain face cracked. The air was thick, almost unbreathable. Claire stepped forward, her voice barely audible. "Emily." The light in the room flickered. When it steadied, a small figure stood at the foot of the bed, a girl in a pale hospital gown, her hair hanging over her face. She didn't move. "You found my room," the child said. Her voice was soft but carried in the stillness. Claire swallowed. "We want to help you. Tell us what to do." The girl lifted her head. One eye was wide and human, the other black as ink. "He hurt me here. He still comes back. You have to burn this place." Ethan glanced around. "If we burn it, we'll trap ourselves." The girl's expression didn't change. "It's the only way to make him leave." From behind them came a sound, the soft, deliberate tap of a scalpel on the doorframe Dr. Grayson stepped into. The room, the dim light bending around him like he absorbed it. His shadow stretched unnaturally along the floor, reaching toward them. Ethan moved in front of Claire. "Go, I'll distract him." Grayson didn't rush. He simply advanced one step at a time, the scalpel glinting. Claire spotted a small metal cabinet against the wall. Inside were dusty jars labeled with chemicals, ethanol, formalin. She grabbed two, smashing one against the bed frame and splashing the other across the floor. The air filled with the sharp burn of fumes. Grayson stopped and tilted his head, as if curious. Emily's voice rose, louder than before. "Now." Claire flicked her lighter. The flame caught instantly, racing along the floor and up the bed. Heat surged in seconds. Grayson's shadow writhed, pulling back from the fire, but his figure remained in the doorway, watching. The doll on the chair began to burn, its porcelain face warping in the heat. The chains rattled violently. Emily stood perfectly still, the flames rising around her, and for the first time she smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. The fire roared, forcing Claire and Ethan toward the far wall. Smoke thickened, choking them. There was no other exit, but the wall behind the bed looked brittle, plaster crumbling from years of damp. Ethan grabbed a length of pipe from the floor and slammed it into the wall. It gave way after 3 blows. Revealing a narrow passage, they crawled through as the fire consumed the room. Behind them, Claire caught one last glimpse of Grayson standing in the flames, untouched, his eyes locked on hers. They stumbled into a side hallway, coughing and gasping for air. The heat followed, but the fire couldn't spread beyond the red room. It was as if the flames knew their purpose and had completed it. Claire leaned against the wall, still clutching Emily's folder. "Do you think it worked?" Ethan shook his head, breathing hard. "I don't know. But if it didn't, we're running out of places to hide." Somewhere deep in the hospital, a single child's laugh echoed. It wasn't playful. It was waiting. The hallway was colder than the basement had been, as if the fire in the red room had stolen all its warmth and left behind a hollow chill. Claire and Ethan pressed forward, both coughing from the smoke that still clung to their lungs. The lights here were brighter than anywhere else they had been in the hospital, but they flickered in a steady, unnatural rhythm, as though responding to an unseen pulse. At the end of the corridor was a heavy metal door with a sign reading "Service Exit." Ethan rushed to it, shoving the panic bar, but the door refused to budge. He slammed his shoulder against it once, twice, but it was as immovable as a wall. Claire stepped closer, running her fingers along the seam. It sealed from the outside, maybe chained. Before Ethan could respond, a distant metallic clang echoed behind them. Something was moving, dragging itself closer. The sound of boots on concrete followed, steady and deliberate. Claire turned, her pulse spiking. "We don't have time. We need another way." They scanned the corridor. On the right, a set of double doors marked operating theater stood slightly ajar. Claire grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him inside. The operating room was cold enough to make their breath visible. Surgical instruments were laid out neatly on a metal tray, as though waiting for the next procedure. The smell of antiseptic was strong, but beneath it lingered the metallic scent of blood. In the center of the room stood an operating table. Leather straps dangled from its sides. A surgical lamp above flickered, and for a moment the light was too bright, forcing Claire to shield her eyes. When she looked again, the table was no longer empty. Emily lay there, her gown torn, her wrists bound to the straps. Her head turned toward Claire. "He's coming. If you stay, he'll take you, too." Ethan stepped forward, his voice low. "Where's the way out?" Emily's gaze shifted to the far wall. "Behind the cabinets, there's a service tunnel, but you have to run before he sees you." The sound of boots grew louder, now accompanied by the faint scrape of metal. Claire and Ethan shoved the tall steel cabinets aside, revealing a narrow door with peeling paint. Ethan pulled it open to find a cramped tunnel lit by a single swinging bulb. Claire hesitated, looking back at Emily. "Come with us." Emily shook her head. "I can't leave. This is where I died, but you can end it." Before Claire could answer, the operating room door creaked open. Dr. Grayson stepped inside, his white coat blackened from the smoke, his scalpel still in hand. His face was calm, but his eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Ethan yanked Claire into the tunnel and slammed the door. They ran, hunched over, the low ceiling forcing them to move awkwardly. The air was damp and smelled of mildew. Behind them, the door to the tunnel burst open. Heavy steps followed. The sound was wrong, too fast, too close. The tunnel angled upward, and a faint light appeared ahead. Claire's legs burned, but she didn't slow. They reached a rusted ladder leading to a hatch. Ethan climbed first, shoving at the metal. It groaned but didn't move. "He's right behind us," Claire said, her voice trembling. Ethan braced himself and slammed his shoulder into the hatch. It gave way with a deafening crack, letting in the cool night air. He scrambled out and pulled Claire up after him. They emerged in the hospital's overgrown courtyard, the building looming behind them like a living thing. The windows glowed faintly, and in several of them, shadowy figures stood watching. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her toward the perimeter fence. It was topped with rusted barbed wire, but a section near the corner had been cut. They slipped through, tearing their clothes but not stopping until they reached the street. Only then did they turn back. The hospital stood silent, its windows now dark. The street was empty. No cars, no people, just the hum of distant power lines. Claire clutched Emily's folder. "We have to tell someone, the police, the press, anyone." Ethan shook his head. "No one will believe us, and if we go back, we won't come out again." A faint movement caught Claire's eye. At the far end of the street, a tall figure stood under a broken street lamp. Even from the distance, she recognized the outline of the coat, the glint of metal in his hand. Dr. Grayson didn't move toward them. He simply stood there, watching. Then the light above him flickered and went out, leaving the spot empty. Ethan exhaled slowly. "We're not free, are we?" Claire didn't answer. She only tightened her grip on the folder and started walking, knowing that no matter how far they went, the hospital and the man inside it would never be truly behind them. From somewhere, far off, barely louder than the wind, came the sound of a child's laugh. 2 weeks later, the rain had not stopped. It poured over the city in a grey, endless sheet, making every building look like it was dissolving into the sky. Claire sat in her apartment with the curtains drawn and the lights dimmed, a mug of coffee cooling untouched beside her. On the table lay the folder she had taken from the hospital, its edges warped from the damp the night they escaped. She had tried to read it twice before, but each time the words seemed to blur, her eyes stinging until she had to stop. Tonight, she decided she would finish it. The folder contained medical records dating back over 60 years, patients who had been admitted for minor injuries but never discharged. Their names, ages, and conditions were typed neatly, followed by a single date in the outcome column. That date always matched the day they had been admitted. Emily's file was near the top. The photo was in black and white, but Claire recognized the sharp eyes and small smile. The record claimed she had died of severe respiratory failure during a routine checkup. Claire knew that was a lie. Near the back of the folder was a section labeled Staff. She hesitated before flipping the page. Dr. Jonathan Grayson's face stared back at her, younger but unmistakable. His employment date was listed as 1953. The date of termination column was blank. A sudden knock on her door made her freeze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She waited, listening. The knock came again, slow and deliberate. 3 times. Claire stood, heart pounding, and moved toward the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. She locked the deadbolt and turned away, but her phone buzzed on the table, the screen lit with a new email from an address she didn't recognize. Service.records at HALEWOOD medical.org. The subject line read, appointment confirmation. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Dear Ms. Claire Thompson, your follow-up appointment has been scheduled for Thursday, 11 p.m. Please arrive promptly. Late arrivals will not be admitted. Location, Halewood Medical Center, Operating Theater 3. Regards, Dr. J. Grayson. The coffee mug tipped over, spilling across the table and soaking the papers. But Claire didn't move to stop it. She deleted the email, turned off her phone, and stuffed the folder into a plastic bag, intending to burn it. That night, she dreamed of the hospital. She was walking its empty corridors, hearing the hum of the lights above. Every door she passed was closed except one, which stood wide open. Inside was the operating table, and on it lay Ethan, his chest rising and falling as though asleep. Dr. Grayson stood beside him, looking up at her. "You're late," he said. Claire woke with her mouth dry and her heart hammering. She was in her bed, but the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. In the kitchen, the plastic bag with the folder was gone. In its place on the table lay a fresh medical chart. Her name was printed at the top. Below it, in neat handwriting, was a date. Thursday. Rain pattered against the window. Somewhere outside, in the street below, came the sound of 3 slow knocks on metal. In the Ardennes forest of Belgium, a chilling legend persists about the Phantom Battalion, a British infantry unit that vanished mysteriously during World War II. Years later, a group of researchers and ghost hunters set out determined to uncover the truth about their fate. But they would soon realize something far more dangerous than war awaited in the shadows of the deep woods. Ardennes. Winter 1944. A thick fog blanketed the dense Ardennes forest, where towering trees stretched like dark phantoms against the dim dawn light. The air was bone-chilling cold, and gusts of icy wind swept through, rustling dry leaves and echoing the soldiers' footsteps with a haunting resonance. Beneath the canopy, nearly 100 British soldiers carried heavy packs on their shoulders, moving cautiously step by step. They were members of the 7th Infantry Battalion, nicknamed by their comrades the Phantom Battalion. The name came not only from their ability to move silently like shadows, but also from the mystery that surrounded them after the most dangerous missions. Lieutenant James Fletcher, the battalion's commander, scanned the faces of his men before giving orders. "Our objective is to destroy the German defensive system here, along the Ardennes forest line. We must act swiftly and precisely. Leave no trace. No one is allowed to break formation." The soldiers' reply echoed in the freezing air. "Yes, sir." They pressed deeper into the forest, closing in on enemy-controlled territory. From the moment they stepped into this area, the atmosphere grew heavy and suffocating. Each soldier began to feel something was wrong. A vague premonition made Special Reconnaissance Officer Sergeant David Harper halt and listen closely. "There's a sound," he whispered, eyes scanning the shadows, but only the wind rustling and dry leaves falling answered him. Lieutenant Fletcher signaled to move on. Gradually, strange whispers crept through the air like distant cries for help echoing from the ancient woods. Some soldiers began to look around in panic. Others claimed to see faint, ghostly shapes drifting in the mist. Sergeant Mark Davies whispered to his comrade, "Do you see that? There's something not human here." Fletcher swallowed his own fear and commanded, "Focus. We have no time for superstitions. Stay in formation and move forward." Night fell quickly, cloaking the forest in a dense fog. The trees stretched out like gigantic shadows in the darkness. The soldiers set up a temporary camp, but none dared to sleep deeply. The wind moaned like a long lament among the branches. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night, startling the entire battalion. Sergeant Harper vanished without a trace after the scream, leaving only his backpack dropped on the ground, swaying gently in the wind. The wails grew louder, panic spreading among the troops, but Lieutenant Fletcher ordered calm. "Nobody leaves their position. Anyone who disappears will be found immediately." The long night dragged on, swallowed by darkness and invisible terror. By dawn, only 70 soldiers remained. On the following days, their numbers continued to dwindle. They spoke of ghosts, mournful cries from unknown sources. Each patrol sent out saw someone fail to return. Finally, after 3 weeks, the battalion vanished completely from the war's map. No one knew their fate. The legend begins, in a nearby Ardennes village. Locals recounted that on windy winter nights, the footsteps of soldiers could be heard within the forest. They called them the Phantom Battalion, the ghostly souls of British soldiers who never left this deadly woodland. People said the forest was cursed. Anyone who entered would be haunted by the battalion's spirits. Unable to escape, a voice told the tale as if daring the listener. "Have you ever heard of soldier ghosts, phantoms who never find rest?" This is the story of the Phantom Battalion soldiers who disappeared, leaving behind a spine-chilling secret in the shadows of the Ardennes forest. Years passed since the mysterious disappearance of the Phantom Battalion. The Ardennes forest remained silent and cold. Villagers dared not venture deep, especially after nightfall. Whispered stories of British soldier ghosts still circulated in pubs and small churches, sending shivers down the spine of anyone who heard them. One cold evening, Henry, the village elder, sat by the fire, recounting to the youth what he had witnessed when he was young. Scouts often passed through, but they always returned with terrified eyes. Speaking of shadowy figures dressed in wartime uniforms moving silently through the trees, he said, "Once I saw a group of soldiers suddenly vanish in the forest, leaving only screams echoing. No one could explain it. This forest is not just wild beasts here, but the souls of the dead, never at rest." The villagers believed the Ardennes forest was not only a bloody battlefield, but a cursed land. Rumors spoke of an ancient ritual performed here, binding the warrior spirits to wander forever, denied passage to the afterlife. As time went on, even the military could find no trace of the battalion. Every scouting mission or search operation ended in failure. They said those who entered the forest with greed or fear never returned. Renowned military historian Thomas Caldwell once came to Ardennes to study the historic battle. He discovered old documents recording that the battalion was not only captured by the enemy, but also entangled in inexplicable supernatural phenomena. A diary found in the British military archives read, "Ghosts appear constantly. They belong neither to our side nor the enemy. They seem like souls yearning to be freed, but trapped in this deadly forest." Caldwell believed the disappearance of the Phantom Battalion was not simply due to war, but linked to an ancient curse hidden within the forest. Not only locals and researchers, but even explorers and ghost hunters avoided Ardennes. They told of getting lost, eerie cries echoing in the night, fleeting shadows that disoriented and terrified them. Some returned with relics, old infantry footprints, rusty guns, and gear remnants of the lost battalion left behind in the woods. But the most terrifying stories were about the appearance of soldier ghosts, endlessly wandering, calling for help with painful screams echoing through the darkness. The legend of the Phantom Battalion spread, becoming one of Europe's most classic ghost stories. Anyone who dared enter Ardennes to investigate faced not only the harsh wilderness, but also invisible forces lurking in the shadows. And because of these mysteries, a modern investigative team comprising an archaeologist, a supernatural researcher, and ghost hunters decided to venture deep into the forest, determined to uncover the fate of the Phantom Battalion and reveal the truth behind the curse that has shrouded this land for decades. In 2021, a special investigation team gathered at a small cafe in Brussels, the capital of Belgium. They came from different fields but shared one goal: to uncover the mystery of the Phantom Battalion. Leading the group was Thomas Caldwell, a military historian with experience studying dozens of major battles from World War II. Beside him was Emily Harper, a supernatural researcher who had taken part in numerous paranormal investigations across Europe. Along with them were Mark Reynolds, a famous ghost hunter known for capturing strange phenomena on his professional cameras, and Sarah Lee, a freelance journalist eager to produce a groundbreaking documentary. In a minimalist meeting room, Caldwell spread old maps and time-worn documents across the table. He recounted the information he had gathered from military records to villagers' testimonies from Ardennes. Everyone listened intently, their eyes filled with curiosity mixed with a hint of fear. Emily stared deeply at the map of the Ardennes forest, pointing to a remote area where most reports of the battalion's disappearance were concentrated. She said, "From what I've researched, this area is not just an ordinary forest. It was once a site for ancient Celtic tribal rituals. This might be related to the curse we've heard about." Mark lifted his camera equipment and said, "If there really are supernatural phenomena, we need to be fully prepared. Video gear, thermal sensors, audio detectors. I'll bring everything necessary to capture any sign." Sarah nodded in agreement. "This will be the biggest story of my career. But I don't want anyone to get hurt. We need a detailed plan." After hours of discussion, the team decided to enter Ardennes the following week, bringing all necessary equipment and maintaining constant communication with the outside world. The day of departure approached. Each member carefully packed their gear, double-checking devices, spirits a mix of excitement and anxious fear as they stepped into the forest. The sky was a dull gray, as if trying to drown everything in thick mist. The biting cold seeped through their layers, but no one dared to stop. With every step deeper into the woods, the bird song and insect noises gradually fell silent. A heavy, invisible pressure seemed to pull them into another world, a realm where past and present intertwined, where the battalion's ghosts still roamed. Emily raised her recorder and whispered, "Listen, ... We don't know what awaits us." Ahead, suddenly, strange sounds echoed from afar, hurried footsteps, and the faint crackling of gunfire in the night. The group froze, eyes turning toward the source. Mark switched on his camera, watching the vague movements in the fog. Figures in old military uniforms flickered in and out among the tree trunks, vanishing as if they never existed. A chill ran down everyone's spine. They all felt the presence of something beyond this world, and so the journey began, seeking the truth about the Phantom Battalion and confronting the restless ghosts that never found peace. The Ardennes forest seemed to swallow every sound the team made. Their footsteps stirred thick layers of decayed leaves, echoing coldly in the silent space. No birds sang, no streams flowed, only heavy breaths and Mark's sensitive electronic devices clicked quietly. They pressed on, following old trails marked on their map, places noted for frequent Phantom Battalion sightings. Suddenly, Emily stopped, her eyes flashing with suspicion. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "I just felt the temperature drop ... far below normal." Mark checked his thermal sensor screen, nodding. "Right, there are deep cold spots, like a freezing void surrounding us." The group started sensing the presence of ghosts, invisible to the naked eye. Their flashlights illuminated empty spaces where darkness thickened unnaturally. Sarah shivered. "It feels like someone's watching us." Before she finished, whispers rose, mingling with the cold wind, faint cries for help, drifting from another world. "Listen," Thomas said, his voice low. "That's the echo of the departed." The team fell silent, letting their ears tune into the mysterious sound. The whispers grew clearer, as if dozens of voices were trying to convey something. Mark kept recording video and audio. Nan-stopped. Suddenly, a shadow flickered past their side, making everyone spin around. But there was only empty air and rustling leaves. "We're not alone here," Emily said, voice trembling. "Those are the battalion's ghosts." They ventured deeper, searching for any remaining physical evidence from the war. Thomas soon spotted an old helmet half buried beneath the leaves. "This belonged to a soldier," he said, carefully lifting and wiping away hardened dirt. "It's been here for decades." Nearby, they found a torn piece of green fabric, part of the British infantry uniform worn during the war. Sarah bent down, picking up a yellowed, tattered paper. "It looks like a letter," she said, eyes glued to the faded writing. "Let's see ... The group gathered close, holding their breath. The handwritten note, in shaky script, read, "We have been trapped in this forest for days. The Germans surround us on all sides. Escape is impossible, but worse than that, the Phantom, it comes at night, taking us one by one, filling us with terror. Those who die are never at rest. If anyone finds this letter, warn them not to come here." A cold wind swept past, stirring scattered belongings on the ground. Mark turned his camera toward the forest, where thick darkness slowly shifted, as if forms silently approached the team. "We must be careful," Thomas said sternly. "These souls aren't just lost, they are cursed." The first night in the forest passed in extreme tension. Every little noise startled them. None dared to sleep deeply, eyes wide open, listening to the strange sounds all around. The darkness in the Ardennes forest was not just mere absence of light. It felt alive, swallowing every ray and every emotion. As the night deepened, strange sounds grew clearer, and the presence of ghosts became undeniable. Mark held his camera, sweeping the lens around their makeshift camp. Suddenly, the group's flashlights flickered off for a moment, then flickered weakly back on, as if pulled by some unseen force. The team froze, silent, except for the crunching of dry leaves being trampled somewhere deep in the woods. Suddenly, Emily screamed as a faint figure in an old military uniform emerged between the trees. The ghost said nothing, just stood there, its empty eyes staring straight at the group. That's a soldier," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. The ghost began to move closer, bringing a bone-chilling cold that seeped into their very bones. Sarah shuddered, trying to stay calm but unable to hide her fear. Thomas forced himself to speak. "Don't panic. Maybe they're trying to send us a message." But before anyone could react, the ghost vanished into the cold air, leaving behind a sharp, icy wind. Immediately, A series of terrifying screams echoed from deep in the forest, sounds of fierce battle long past. Gunshots, cries of pain, and pounding footsteps surged relentlessly. Panic-stricken, the group scrambled for shelter, but ghosts began to appear scattered around the camp. Others emerged, their faces etched with pain, anger, and despair. Mark noticed a scratch on one member's arm, though no one had seen anything that could have caused it. "They're touching us," Mark said anxiously. Emily tried to record the eerie sounds, hoping to decode the whispered voices. Suddenly, the recorder picked up a voice. "Help us. Free us." Thomas quickly said, "This might be our only way out. They're trapped, cursed. If we don't help them, we'll be the next victims." Despite her fear, Sarah agreed. "We must find the origin of this curse and break it." The team pressed deeper into the forest. Despite the increasingly aggressive spirits, they had to find an object or place linked to the ancient ritual that birthed the curse. Meanwhile, the ghostly soldiers lingered, reminders that the war never truly ended here. It had become another battle between life and death, between the present and eternal darkness. After a tense night surrounded by spirits, the team regained composure and decided to venture further into the Ardennes. They followed an ancient map Thomas had brought, leading to an area said to be the site of Celtic rituals. The path ahead was littered with decaying leaves and twisted roots. Sunlight filtered through sparse branches, casting patches of light and shadow, as if the forest itself was hiding something. The deeper they went, the more oppressive and cold the air became. Emily stopped, pointing to an ancient stone structure, covered in moss and half buried in earth and leaves. It was a stone circle, a relic of long-forgotten mystical ceremonies. Thomas crouched to examine it, voice trembling. "This is where the Celts performed their rites. It could be a prison for souls or the source of the curse." Sarah filmed every detail of the stone circle. Mark scanned with his senses and detected strange energy levels, unexplainable by normal science. The air felt suffocating, as if an invisible force was present. Suddenly, a cold light flickered within the stone circle, accompanied by distant echoes that sounded like calls from the spirit world. The group fell silent, fear mingling with curiosity. Thomas stepped forward, firm. "We may be standing at the curse's origin." While observing, Emily spotted a metal object half buried in the ground, a small, old, dusty box. Carefully, they opened it to reveal a handwritten letter and a black stone artifact shaped like an ancient symbol. The letter, written in Old English, trembled with desperation. "Whoever finds this, beware. This is a symbol linking the living world and the dead. It is cursed by warrior spirits who cannot find peace due to guilt and pain. If this symbol is not destroyed, the curse will never end." A sudden cold wind blew, shaking the leaves like ghostly hands, beckoning. The soldier ghosts appeared clearly around them. Screaming in pain and fury, Bach raised his camera, capturing the chaotic scene. Sarah whispered, "We have to destroy this, or everyone will remain in danger." Thomas looked around, knowing this was the decisive moment. He leaned over, took a small hammer from his bag, and prepared to smash the stone symbol. The moment the hammer struck, a piercing shriek echoed through the forest. Cold light swept the area, and the ghosts were sucked into the box, vanishing gradually. Silence returned strangely, broken only by the team's relieved breaths. Emily softly said, "It seems the curse has been broken." But when they turned back, the way out of Arden Forest was no longer clear. The dense woods twisted, trees contorted, and the light dimmed. Sarah's voice chilled. "We might not escape here as easily as we thought." Right after the ancient symbol was broken, the space around the investigation team shifted strangely. The Arden Forest, already cold and gloomy, now felt fiercer, with trees twisting like invisible hands trying to hold them back. A chilling howl echoed everywhere, cries of despair mixed with hatred from souls trapped without release. The soldier ghosts appeared clearly, but this time, they didn't just stand still or flicker briefly, they attacked directly, charging the team. With terrifying supernatural strength, Mark struggled to turn on his camera, but the device kept glitching, the light flickering erratically. Emily and Sarah were surrounded by ghosts, feeling icy hands touch their skin, causing real pain. Thomas shouted, "We must hold firm. If they gain the upper hand, we'll never escape this place." The team worked together, dodging and weaving, searching for a way out of the encirclement. They ran through thick underbrush, but every step seemed hindered, the trees twisting as if to trap them. Sarah yelled, "We need to reach the old exit. It's our only way out." Thomas urged, "Move fast, don't let the ghosts catch up." In the chaos, Mark spotted a faintly glowing object beneath rotting leaves, a rusty infantry badge. He grabbed it and shouted, "This is the key. These things might help us." Emily suggested, "Maybe we need to gather the soldiers' belongings, like a way to calm their spirits." Quickly, the group collected scattered relics, running while trying not to separate. Ghostly screams and footsteps chased them closely. Near the forest edge, sunlight began filtering through the trees, bringing a glimmer of hope. But the forest's exit seemed barred. Trees suddenly twisted, forming an impassable wall. Thomas knelt, panting, then looked at the others. "We must break through this wall with willpower and courage. The curse ends only when we conquer our fear." Emily, Sarah, Mark, and Thomas joined hands, yelling a powerful cry of unity and determination. Suddenly, the wooden wall cracked open. Sunlight flooded in. The group sprinted through, hearts pounding, not daring to look back. Stepping out of the Ardennes, a wave of relief washed over them. The gentle breeze seemed to chase away the darkness, yet their eyes could not forget the image of those soldier ghosts, fallen men who could not rest. Sarah thought silently, "We escaped, but this story will live in the shadows of Ardennes." As the team exited the Ardennes forest, the sunlight felt like a warm greeting, but none could forget what they'd endured. Exhausted, their minds still reeling with ghostly images and relentless screams, Thomas glanced back toward the dense forest, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "We broke the curse, but not all are freed," he murmured. "Those ghosts are souls trapped in pain and hatred. Perhaps they will always linger here, waiting for true peace." Emily nodded slowly, "And maybe their story will never end. These spirits are not just remnants of war, they're reminders of the terrible cost of sacrifice." Sarah, camera still in hand, said, "We can tell their story, make the world remember them, so their souls won't be forgotten. But we must also warn those curious enough to enter Ardennes." Mark added, "I captured everything: images, sounds. We'll make a documentary that haunts and delivers a profound message." But when they returned to the city, the shadow of Ardennes seemed to follow them. Emily began having strange dreams, soldier ghosts appearing at night, as if sending messages. Sarah received strange phone calls, whispers from unknown numbers. Mark spotted shadowy figures in footage, unexplained and eerie. Thomas, the oldest, pondered a greater secret. He wondered if the curse was truly broken, or just part of a longer chain of events yet unfinished. One night, as the group gathered to share their post-journey experiences, Sarah's phone vibrated. On the screen appeared a message from an unknown number. "They never left. They're still waiting. And you're next." The story of the Phantom Battalion was no mere legend. It was a warning, a mystery with no final answer. And deep in the Ardennes forest's darkness, the ghosts still silently wait the soldiers. Daniel M. sat silently on the weathered bench outside the barracks, his gaze fixed on the endless stretch of desert before him. The sun blazed overhead, turning the sand into a shimmering sea of gold and orange. Despite the intense heat, over 40 degrees Celsius, a strange chill crept along Daniel's spine, an uneasy feeling that seemed completely out of place in this burning landscape. At 28 years old, Daniel was a seasoned soldier. He had served in infantry units, deployed to multiple conflict zones around the world. Yet, nothing had prepared him for the strange atmosphere that greeted him upon arrival at Al-Haima. Al-Haima was no ordinary military outpost. Originally built as a field hospital during the fierce desert wars of the 1980s, the compound had lain abandoned for 23 years. Recently, the military command had repurposed it as an observation post on the desert's edge. The walls were cracked, paint peeling, and windows shattered or boarded up. The air carried a musty, heavy scent, the smell of decay and forgotten memories. Daniel had barely stepped foot inside when he sensed something was wrong. The soldiers who had been stationed there warned him quietly, "If you get assigned to the East Building, stay away from room 3. A grizzled sergeant told him with a serious tone. Daniel laughed it off as an old superstition or a joke meant to scare newcomers. But the same warning echoed from several others, seasoned soldiers who spoke with an uneasy respect. Each time the words sank into Daniel's mind like a seed of doubt. That evening, Daniel settled into his assigned sleeping quarters, a small room in the main barracks shared by 4 men. The concrete walls were bare, and the thin mattress offered little comfort. Outside, The desert winds whispered, carrying the dry sand like tiny ghosts swirling through the air. Despite the exhaustion from travel and heat, Daniel found himself wide awake, staring at the ceiling. He tried to shake off the strange sensation, gripping him a coldness that seemed to seep into his bones. The contrast of the blazing desert and the freezing chill inside the base felt like a contradiction. Impossible to explain. Suddenly, a sound shattered the stillness. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. They echoed through the hallway outside his door, growing louder and then fading away. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. Peering through the cracked door, he caught a glimpse of a figure passing by the small window, dressed in a white coat that fluttered like a spectre. The figure moved swiftly, silently, vanishing into the darkness. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and bolted into the corridor. His beam swept through the empty hallway, but no one was there. The only sound was the faint hum of the desert night. Was it his imagination, or something else? The next day, during a meal in the mess hall, Daniel sat next to Corporal Reyes, a veteran with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry years of burden. Daniel mentioned the mysterious figure. "That's the white nurse," Reyes said quietly, almost as if afraid to speak louder. "She's a ghost, a nurse who died here years ago, still searching for her patients. Some say she's cursed. Anyone who sees her, well, they're marked." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Reyes shrugged, but his eyes didn't meet Daniel's. "I've seen things you wouldn't believe. The stories might sound crazy, but this place, it's different." Daniel nodded, but tried to keep his mind rational. The desert heat was getting to them all. He decided to focus on his duties and not dwell on ghost stories. But deep inside, the warnings echoed louder than ever. The days passed slowly at Alheimer. The sun rose mercilessly each morning, baking the desert sands and turning the once proud military base into a ghostly skeleton. Despite the harsh conditions, Daniel threw himself into his routine, determined not to let the strange stories or the eerie atmosphere get under his skin. But at night, when the heat finally faded and the desert grew quiet, Daniel's mind betrayed him. On his very first night, he was awakened by a faint noise, the slow, heavy footsteps of someone walking down the hallway outside the barracks. The sound was deliberate, almost measured. Daniel sat up on his cot, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped just beyond the door, then receded down the hall until they vanished completely. He told himself it was one of the other soldiers moving about, but when he checked, the hall was empty. The only sound the whispering wind against cracked walls. The next day, Daniel found himself drawn toward the east building, the very place he had been warned to avoid, especially room 3. Curiosity gnawed at him though, logic screamed to stay away. Peeking through a broken window, he caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. For a brief moment, a figure in a white coat passed by, slender, ghostly pale, slipping silently into the shadows. When Daniel tried to get closer, there was nothing but dust and silence. That evening, in the mess hall, Daniel listened as a senior soldier shared a chilling tale. The white nurse, the soldier, began lowering his voice. She was Layla Hassan, a nurse stationed here during the war. They say she was trying to save her patients when the east building was hit. "Hit?" Daniel asked. "A sudden bombardment," the soldier replied grimly. "The whole building collapsed with wounded soldiers trapped inside. Layla died in the rubble, but some say her spirit never left." Daniel's mind raced as the soldier continued. "People who have been posted here speak of hearing her footsteps, seeing her wandering halls. Sometimes she appears at night, searching for the men she couldn't save." That night, Daniel's dreams were haunted. In the darkness of sleep, he stood inside room 3, a cold, sterile space lined with rows of hospital beds covered with white sheets, stained dark with blood. The air was thick and heavy, a strange mix of antiseptic and decay. He could hear soft moans and whispers, the faint sounds of suffering from unseen patients. A woman in a nurse's uniform drifted silently among the beds. Her face was pale, eyes wide with sorrow and fear. "Help us," she whispered, her voice barely audible, like a distant echo. Daniel woke with a start, heart pounding and sweat slicking his skin. The room around him was still and silent, but the feeling of dread lingered. Over the next few nights, the strange occurrences increased. Lights flickered unpredictably in the east. Building shadows moved just beyond the edge of vision. Whispers, too soft to understand, brushed past his ears when he was alone. Daniel found himself drawn repeatedly to the edge of the east building, feeling an invisible pull toward room 3. Despite the warnings, he couldn't resist. What was this place hiding, and why did it feel like the past was bleeding into the present? Daniel knew one thing for sure. This mission was going to be far darker than he ever imagined. 2 hours before midnight, the desert sun had long since vanished beyond the dunes, leaving the Alzheimer base wrapped in an eerie twilight. Daniel checked his watch. 1:58 a.m. soon. His shift guarding the east building would begin the place everyone warned him to avoid. Despite the unease that had settled deep in his chest, Daniel forced himself to focus. He was a soldier, after all. Ghost stories and legends were distractions he couldn't afford. He took a deep breath and steeled his nerves. At exactly 2 a.m., Daniel grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the east building. The air was colder here, an unnatural chill biting into his skin despite the desert heat outside. The walls of the building loomed ahead, worn, scarred by time and neglect. His orders were clear: patrol the halls between 2 and 4 a.m. and report anything unusual. Daniel's footsteps echoed on the cracked concrete floors as he moved through the dim corridors. The only light came from his flickering flashlight and the weak moonlight filtering through broken windows. At first, everything seemed silent. No creaks, no whispers, just the sound of his own breath and footsteps. Suddenly, he heard it, a faint whisper, carried on the stale air. It was in English, but with a strange accent that made the words sound distorted. "You're not supposed to be here. ... double quotes. Daniel froze. The voice seemed to circle him, repeated softly, like a chant. He scanned the hallway, trying to locate the source. His flashlight beam landed on the doorway of room 3, the very room he had been warned about. The door was slightly ajar, creaking as it swayed in the faint breeze. Compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity, Daniel pushed the door open and stepped. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of antiseptic and something metallic blood. His flashlight flickered violently, casting shifting shadows on the peeling walls. At the far end of the room stood a figure dressed in a white nurse's coat. The figure's back was to Daniel, but as his light hit it, the head turned slowly, unnaturally slow. The head twisted 180 degrees while the body remained still, revealing a face impossible to forget. Pale, almost translucent skin stretched tightly over hollow cheeks. The eyes were milky white, devoid of pupils, staring straight at Daniel. Her mouth was torn into a gruesome, jagged smile stretching from ear to ear. Her voice, dry and hollow, rasped out, "Leave, before it's too late." Daniel stumbled backward, heart hammering, unable to tear his eyes away. He blinked hands suddenly. The room was empty, no figure, no blood scent, only the cold, sterile silence. He was alone. Shaken, Daniel fled the east building and didn't stop running until he was back among the other soldiers. He kept trying to convince himself it was a hallucination, a trick of his mind. But deep down, he knew something terrible lurked in room 3, and that the white nurse was watching. After the terrifying encounter in room 3, Daniel could no longer dismiss the warnings as mere superstition. Determined to understand the strange occurrences, he decided to investigate the history of Alzheimer and the East Building. The base's main library was a dusty, neglected room, lined with aging shelves packed with faded documents, manuals, and old reports. Few soldiers visited this place anymore, preferring digital devices and briefings. But for Daniel, it became a sanctuary, a place to seek answers. One afternoon, Daniel sifted through boxes of archived files labeled Medical Unit 1980s. The yellowed papers crackled as he opened them, revealing records of patients, staff, and events during the base's wartime operations. His eyes caught a report from 1987, detailing a fierce artillery attack on the East Building. The document described how a sudden bombardment had caused the roof to collapse, trapping many inside. Among the casualties was Layla Hassan, a nurse assigned to the field hospital. According to the report, she was desperately trying to save wounded soldiers when the attack struck. 17 patients were confirmed dead, buried under rubble or burned beyond recognition. What chilled Daniel most was the description of Layla's body when it was finally recovered. Her eyes were wide open, staring in terror, and her mouth was frozen in a silent scream. A footnote mentioned a strange detail. Layla had been attempting to save one particular soldier, a high-ranking officer critical to the war effort, who was never found. Rumors had long circulated among the troops that this soldier's body had been secretly removed or hidden, but no official records confirmed his fate. As Daniel read further, the sense of tragedy deepened. Witnesses claimed Layla had called out for that soldier for days while trapped, refusing to abandon him. The trauma seemed to have broken her mind before she died. Daniel closed the file, a heavy weight pressing on his chest. The nurse from the night Layla was more than a ghost story. She was a tortured soul trapped by unfinished business. And room 3, the place everyone feared, was the site of her last, desperate fight for survival. Daniel felt a mix of fear and determination. If the spirits were restless, maybe they needed justice. Maybe he was meant to find the truth buried beneath years of silence. The nights at Alhamar grew darker, not just in the absence of sunlight, but in the weight pressing on Daniel's mind. For several evenings in a row, exactly at 3 a.m., Daniel was jolted awake by a steady knocking at his door. The sound was slow and deliberate, 3 sharp knocks followed by silence. Each time he opened the door, the hallway was empty, silent except for the faint desert wind whispering through broken windows. It's nothing, Daniel tried to tell himself, some prank by the others, or my imagination. But the haunting persistence of the knocking gnawed at him. One night, Daniel confided in Corporal Reyes, a hardened soldier who had been stationed at Alheimer longer than most. Reyes' expression grew serious. "You hear the white nurse's call?" "Huh," he said quietly. Daniel frowned. "You mean the ghost?" Reyes nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw her once. The first time I did, I woke up with a bruise right here." He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a deep purple hand-shaped mark on his shoulder. "White nurse leaves her mark. Anyone who sees her gets touched. It's like a warning or a curse. I don't know what comes next, but it's not good." Daniel stared at the mark, a chill crawling up his spine. He touched his own shoulder, half expecting to find the same bruise. "Don't let her find you alone," Reyes warned. "She's looking for something, and whoever she marks might never be the same again." That night, Daniel lay awake, listening to the ticking clock, waiting for the knock. When it came, he didn't open the door, but the sense of being watched grew heavier. He knew the white nurse was near, and that whatever she wanted, it was only a matter of time before she came for him. The desert had a way of turning fierce without warning. That night, dark clouds of sand rolled in, swallowing the horizon like an advancing wall. The howling wind whipped against the old base, rattling windows and making the cracked walls groan. Daniel was on duty alone in the east building. The storm had knocked out communication lines and buried the narrow roads in sand, cutting off all contact with the rest of the base. He lit a small lantern and settled into the cold, dimly lit corridor. The howling outside was a relentless roar, a reminder of the desert's unforgiving nature. Feeling uneasy, Daniel pushed open the door to room 3. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of dust, and something metallic he couldn't quite place. As his eyes adjusted, Daniel blinked in disbelief. The room was filled with 17 hospital beds, all lined up neatly in rows. On each bed lay a figure wrapped tightly in white shrouds, still and silent. A low, mournful sound filled the room, faint moans and labored breathing, like the suffering of trapped souls. Daniel's heart pounded. He felt a presence behind him. Slowly, a pale figure emerged from the shadows, the white nurse. Her skin was ghostly white, eyes vacant but filled with sorrow. She moved closer, raising a hand that felt ice-cold, even from a distance. Her touch landed on Daniel's chest. The chill was unbearable, sinking deep into his bones. Her voice was barely a whisper, but filled with desperate urgency. "Save them, or stay with us." Daniel's mind raced. Was this a warning, a plea? The storm outside thundered like a beast as the weight of the spirits pressed down on him. He stumbled backward, almost falling, overwhelmed by the spectral vision. As the wind howled louder, Daniel knew one thing for certain. The restless souls trapped in room 3 were waiting for him to decide their fate. Haunted by the chilling encounter during the sandstorm, Daniel knew he needed answers, real ones, beyond whispers and rumors. If Layla's spirit was still trapped here, searching for justice, then he had to understand what really happened all those years ago. He sought out the one person rumored to have survived the chaos of that fateful day, an elderly military medic who had once worked at Alheimer during the 1980s. His name was Dr. Ahmed Salim, a man now living quietly in a nearby town. After several attempts, Daniel arranged a meeting. The old man welcomed him into a modest home filled with faded photographs and relics from the past. Dr. Salim's eyes, clouded with age but sharp with memory, grew heavy as he began to speak. Layla was not like the others, he said softly. She was devoted to her patients beyond reason. When the attack came, she was trapped under the rubble for nearly 3 days. During that time, she could hear the dying cries of the wounded around her. The doctor paused, his voice trembling. She called out for a soldier, someone important, but no one knew who. They say she lost her mind in those hours, refusing to let go, begging for help that would never come. Daniel listened, the weight of the story settling on his shoulders. By the time rescuers found her, Layla was delirious. She did not recognize anyone and kept repeating the soldier's name. But when she finally passed, her eyes were wide open, mouth agape, frozen in fear. Dr. Salim shook his head. Since then, every new soldier stationed here at night hears her calling. Some see her walking the halls, others hear her whispers. She's trapped in a nightmare, seeking someone she could not save. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked. The old Minek looked at him with weary eyes. "Layla wants justice. The man she tried to save. If you find the truth, maybe her spirit can rest." As Daniel left the house, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky blood red. He knew the path ahead was dark and dangerous, but the haunting voices of Alzheimer had chosen him for a reason, and he would not turn away. The base had grown colder in the days following. Daniel's visit with Dr. Salim, the shadows seemed to lengthen, and whispers echoed louder in the corridors. Daniel found himself glancing nervously over his shoulder, feeling the invisible eyes watching his every move. Then, without warning, Corporal Reyes vanished. It happened during a routine night shift. Reyes was assigned to patrol the east building alone, just as Daniel had before. But when the morning came, Reyes was gone. His bunk was untouched, his belongings still neatly arranged. The only traces were his hat and rifle, left eerily placed. In the center of room 3. A frantic search was launched immediately. Soldiers combed every inch of the base and the surrounding desert. The radio crackled with updates, but no sign of Reyes was ever found. Security cameras, though limited, were reviewed again and again. The footage showed nothing unusual until the very last moment, a faint white shadow appearing near Reyes, seemingly pulling him into the dark corner of the hallway. Then, static interference washed out the image completely. Daniel watched the footage with growing dread. The shadowy figure was unmistakable, the white nurse. His stomach churned as he realized Reyes's warnings had been true. The curse was real, and it was deadly. A deep bruise in the shape of a hand had appeared on Daniel's shoulder. The same mark Reyes had shown him weeks earlier. The chilling truth settled like a weight on Daniel's heart. The white nurse was not just a restless spirit, she was hunting, and Daniel was next. After Corporal Reyes' sudden disappearance, Daniel felt the walls closing in around him. The base, once just a place of duty, had become a cage filled with unseen terrors. Sleep was no longer a refuge but a battleground. It began with a subtle sensation, a tingling on his right shoulder. At first, Daniel thought it was a muscle strain from the long hours of patrol, but when he looked in the mirror one morning, he froze. There it was, a deep purple bruise shaped like a handprint, vivid and unmistakable. It matched exactly the mark Reyes had shown him before vanishing. Panic clawed at Daniel's chest. He tried to scrub the bruise away, but it remained stubbornly darkening with each passing day. More unsettling were the voices. Whispers haunted his waking moments, soft murmurs brushing past his ears even when no one was near. Sometimes the voices were angry, sometimes pleading. Daniel's reflection betrayed him as well. In the cracked mirror of his quarters, he would catch glimpses of a different face, pale, with blank white eyes and a grotesque mouth torn into a sinister smile, standing just behind him. He spun around, but no one was there. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. Daniel knew the mark was more than a bruise. It was a curse, a warning, a countdown every day. The whispers grew louder, the face in the mirror more persistent, and Daniel feared that soon he would join Reyes lost to the darkness of room 3 forever. Daniel's heart pounded as the clock struck 3 a.m. The air in the east building was thick with tension, heavy with the ghosts of the past. Tonight he knew he had to confront the source of his torment. Room 3. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped into the corridor, flashlight in hand. The weak fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, wavering shadows on the cracked walls. Every step echoed like a drumbeat in the silence. As he reached room 3, the door creaked open by itself, revealing a scene both familiar and surreal. The room had transformed. The walls glowed with an eerie blue light, and the steady beep of medical monitors filled the air. The beds, once empty, were now lined with the faint outlines of figures wrapped in white sheets. From the shadows, Layla Hassan appeared. Her ghostly form shimmered in the dim light, eyes filled with sorrow and determination. "You must finish what I started," she whispered, voice trembling. "Find the man who abandoned us. Justice must be served." Daniel's mind reeled as the room shifted into a haunting vision. He saw a high-ranking officer, cold and unyielding, locking the doors and fleeing as the bombardment raged. His betrayal had doomed Layla and her patients. Layla's spirit reached out to Daniel, pleading for his help to expose the truth and lay the restless souls to rest. As the vision faded, Daniel felt a newfound resolve burning within him. The nightmare was far from over, but now he had a mission: to uncover the secrets buried beneath Al-Hima and to deliver justice for those forgotten in the desert sands. Daniel buried himself in research, determined to unearth the secrets that had long been hidden beneath the shifting sands of Al-Hima. Days and nights blurred as he pored over military archives, testimonies, and classified reports, desperate to find any mention of the officer who had abandoned Layla and her patients. What he discovered shocked him. The officer in question had not only survived the attack, he had climbed the ranks after the war, becoming a powerful politician with deep connections in the military and government. His name was whispered in the halls of power, untouchable and shielded by influence. Daniel's heart pounded as he realized the scope of the cover-up. The truth about that fateful night was deliberately erased, buried alongside the bodies in room 3. But Layla's spirit was relentless. Daniel's nights became plagued by nightmares, blood seeping from the walls of his quarters, phantom footsteps pacing just outside his door, and the chilling sound of Layla's voice calling from the darkness. Sleep eluded him as the haunting intensified. His body weakened, his mind fraying under the weight of the curse. Yet, through the torment, Daniel's resolve only hardened. He knew that exposing the truth was the only way to free the trapped souls and to save himself. The battle was no longer just against ghosts in the desert. It was against the powerful forces determined to keep the past buried forever. Daniel's decision to confront the past brought him face to face with danger far beyond the supernatural. As he prepared to meet the powerful officer, now a high-ranking politician, he knew the stakes had never been higher. Their meeting was tense. Daniel laid out the evidence he had gathered, demanding justice for Layla and the 17 soldiers left to die in the East Building. But before the conversation could escalate, a chilling event stopped them both. Suddenly, the politician collapsed, falling from the balcony of his office. His eyes were wide open, frozen in terror, his mouth agape, as if trying to scream. Daniel understood instantly. Layla had taken justice into her own hands. The curse was lifted, the restless spirits finally at peace. Years later, long after Daniel had left the military, he often awoke at exactly 3 a.m. in the still darkness. His old flashlight flickered on. He smiled, knowing that Layla's spirit was still there, watching over room 3, guarding it, as she always had. The desert was silent once more, but the promise to remember the lost souls would never fade. If you've ever heard of Lincoln High School in Seattle, you've probably heard the rumors about the West Wing, an old, forgotten hallway, a classroom locked for years. Room 304. People say it's not just abandoned, it's a place where spirits never leave. The story begins when Lena Thompson, a newly transferred student, accidentally hears 3 knocks echoing from the West Wing. A knock that seems harmless, but it's an invitation, or, more accurately, a deadly warning. Decades ago, a student named Emily Carter disappeared from that room. She was never found, and now Lena stands before the same door. At first, everything seems normal, but as she approaches, a chill seeps into her bones, and a long-haired figure appears in the window pane. No one can hear it, no one can see it, but the whispers from room 304 follow you. They pull you in, slowly, until there's no way out. The only question left is, would you dare enter a locked room that terrifies the entire city, where some who went in never returned, and where the remaining spirits wait for their next victim? Seattle, Washington, The October sky is gloomy, heavy gray clouds threatening to pour rain at any moment. Lena Thompson stands outside Lincoln High School's gates, gripping the straps of her backpack. She has just moved from Portland, another rainy city, but somehow Seattle feels different, colder, wetter, and quieter. The main building rises ahead, red brick, large glass doors, square windows lined neatly. But to the left, a separate old, grey building stands isolated, its entrance blocked with chains, windows coated in dusty grime. Lena pauses, staring. A cold wind whistles through the empty corridor, carrying a faint sound like fingernails scraping wood. Don't stare too long. A girl's voice calls beside her. Lena turns to see a blonde student with a blue backpack waiting to enter class. Why not? Lena asks. West Wing, the girl answers shortly, then lowers her voice. Room 304. That place isn't for newcomers. Lena frowns. Before she can ask more, the bell rings, and they both enter the main building. As Lena is led around by the homeroom teacher, she keeps glancing out the window toward the West Wing. That afternoon, after lunch in the cafeteria, Lena returns to class. Opening her new desk, she finds a folded scrap of paper, old and faintly musty, as if it had been hidden away for years. She unfolds it to see messy blue ink. If you hear knocks from 304, do not answer. Lena frowns, looking around. No one notices her. At the back of the room, Mia, the blonde girl from earlier, sits engrossed in a book, but the corner of her mouth twitches upward slightly. All afternoon, those words echo in Lena's mind. By the time school ends, rain begins to pour. Heavy drops hammer the glass roof of the hallway like a drum. Lena stands in a corner of the courtyard, glancing once more at the West Wing. The grey wooden door of room 304 remains shut and silent, but she feels as though someone is standing just inside, watching. Thursday afternoon, rain pours relentlessly from morning. The entire Lincoln campus is shrouded in a thin mist. Lena is assigned to monitor the hall with two classmates, but by the end of the hour, both have left early. Lena is alone in the long corridor. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead. Rain pounds the metal roof rhythmically. Lena sweeps from the new classrooms toward the old stairs leading to the West Wing. Few people ever use this path. Walls are stained, tiles cracked. The air colder than in the main building. The closer she gets to the West Wing, the colder her back becomes. She slows her steps, eyeing the old wooden doors, all locked and dusty. At the end of the hall room, 304, appears grey wooden door, tarnished brass number plate. The rusty lock is still secure. Lena stops and peers through the small glass window. Inside, darkness shrouds the tables and chairs, all layered with thin dust. Suddenly, 3 knocks echo, sharp, decisive. Lena jumps, her heart racing. Before she can react, a faint, trembling female voice drifts from inside. Open the door for me, it's so cold. Lena swallows hard. The voice is shaky, almost a whisper right by her ear. Though she stands a step away, instinct urges her to turn and run, but the words slip out before she can stop them. Who's there? At that moment, the fluorescent light above flickers and dies. The hallway plunges into dense darkness. Space seems to shrink. Lena hears, breathing, close, icy enough to sting her ears. A damp sensation brushes her shoulder, like a hand brushing past. She steps back, hitting a broom that falls to the floor. Metal clatters loudly in the eerie silence. Then, a soft, drawn-out screech comes from the door crack, trembling. Lena spins to run, and the lights snap back on. The hallway is empty. Only the sound of rain remains. Lena breathes heavily, her heart still racing. She drops the broom and hurries out of the West Wing. In the brief glance back, the window of room 304 remains dark, but she thinks she sees a shadow standing just inside, perfectly still. The next morning, Lena walked into class to find a warm paper cup of coffee waiting on her desk. Beside it lay a small handwritten note. We need to talk. Meet me in the library after school, Noah. She didn't know who Noah was, but curiosity made her agree. That afternoon, the school library was nearly empty. Lena searched for a moment and spotted a tall, thin boy with messy black hair sitting at a corner table. When he saw her, he nodded slightly and gestured to the seat opposite. I'm Noah. I heard you were near the West Wing yesterday. His voice was calm and measured. Lena hesitated, then sat down. Who told you that? She asked. Noah opened his bag, and pulled out an old document bundle wrapped in plastic. "I've been keeping track of everything that happens in the West Wing. I'm in the journalism club, but this has never been officially published. You know Emily Carter?" Lena shook her head. "Emily studied here 10 years ago. She died in room 304 on a rainy afternoon just like yesterday. Police ruled it a suicide, but there were too many strange details." Noah pulled out a faded photograph. In it, Emily stands beside a desk, smiling at the camera. But in the window pane, behind her, a long-haired figure faces the classroom. Its features are unclear, only rain dripping from its hair onto its shoulders. "This photo was taken the day she died," Noah said. "The photographer didn't notice the figure until the photo was developed, and then he disappeared." Lena held the photo, palms damp with sweat. She remembered the faint, trembling voice from yesterday. "You mean Emily is still there?" Noah looked straight into her eyes. "Not just Emily. Many students vanished near that room. All were last seen in or around the West Wing, and all heard the 3 knocks." Lena set the photo down, a chill running down her spine. Noah leaned closer. "If you hear the knocks, never answer. That's how it all begins." Outside, a sudden downpour hammered against the library windows. Lena turned to look, and through the cascading water, she thought she saw a long figure standing in the courtyard. Rumors about Lena approaching room 304 spread quickly. During break, 3 boys from the sports club approached her. The leader, Kyle, tall with short hair, wore a half-smile, teasing and challenging. "I heard you're brave," Kyle said, leaning on her desk. "We're live streaming in the West Wing tonight. Want to prove you're not scared? Come with us." Lena started to refuse, but Mia interjected, her voice dripping sarcasm. "Or are you really scared?" Her words made Lena hesitate. In the end, she agreed, though her heart felt heavy. That night, the schoolyard was dark, lit only by the pale yellow streetlights filtering through the fence. Kyle's group carried phones on gimbals, live streaming as they entered the West Wing. Corridor. A cold wave hit as they stepped through the old door. Footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. Kyle laughed loudly, pointing to room 304. "There it is, our school legend." He pressed his ear to the door and knocked 3 times, teasing, "Emily, open the door for us." The group laughed. Lena stepped back, heart racing. Kyle's phone camera pointed at the window pane. On the screen, a long-haired figure stood inside, face hidden by wet strands. Kyle didn't notice it, but comments flooded the live stream viewers, warning them. 3 knocks answered from within, matching Kyle's rhythm. A cold gust rattled the phone's light. Kyle looked around, forcing a laugh. Just the wind, probably. Suddenly, the knocking turned into scraping, harsh and urgent. The door shook slightly. The camera swung to Lena. Through the crack, she saw a pale hand pressed against the wood, long nails dripping water onto the floor. Kyle stepped back, but another boy, Ryan, moved closer, pressing the lens to the door. As he leaned in, the long-haired figure lifted its head, revealing a ghostly white face, hollow eyes, mouth stretched into a black void. The phone slipped from his hands, image shaking before plunging into darkness. The live stream ended instantly. The next morning, Ryan didn't show up for school. Police later found his bike abandoned near the forest behind the school. No other trace. That night, lying in bed, Lena could still hear the 3 knocks, clear as if they were right outside her door. A week after Ryan's disappearance, no one dared speak of the West Wing aloud. Yet Lena often dreamed of room 304. In her dreams, she stood amid dusty desks, and in the corner, Emily sat with her back to her, wet hair swaying gently. On Friday afternoon, Lena was assigned to carry cleaning supplies to the storage room near the West Wing. Heavy rain poured outside. The corridor was darker than usual. She walked slowly past the old doors, trying not to look at 304. But her gaze kept being drawn to the dusty window pane. Something seemed to move inside. Lena froze, heart pounding. For a moment, she saw a figure standing by the last desk. Then, 3 knocks echoed from within, bouncing off the empty hall. She stepped back, but curiosity pushed her forward. She placed her hand on the doorknob. The door was ice cold. Just as she was about to step back, the lock clicked, as if someone inside turned it. The door cracked open. A blast of cold air hit her, carrying the smell of damp mold and metallic temps. Without thinking, Lena pushed the door and stepped in. The room was dark, lit only by a faint sliver of light through the window. Desks and chairs were scattered, the floor blotched with water. Lena felt someone behind her. The door slammed shut with a thud that made her jump. She ran to pull it, but it didn't budge. The wind outside hissed, mingling with faint scratching on the floor. She spun, scanning the room. In the corner, a chair slowly turned, as if someone had just risen. Weak light revealed a pale hand. Gripping its edge, the familiar voice whispered, almost at her ear, "I see you." The sound mingled with dripping water. Lena pressed against the door, heart racing. The room seemed to shrink, darkness thickening. From behind the teacher's desk, the long-haired figure began to move forward, slow and heavy. Water streamed from its hair, leaving dark streaks across the floor. When it was just a few steps away, the back door suddenly swung open. Lena bolted, tumbling into the hallway. She glanced back. The door was closed, as if it had never been opened. No water stains remained on the floor. All that night, something appeared in Lena's backpack that she was certain she hadn't placed there herself. An old, soaked school uniform, folded neatly atop her books. Since that day, Lena could focus on nothing. In class, her eyes always drifted toward the window leading to the West Wing hallway. Whenever she closed her eyes, the image of wet hair and pale hands returned. She began researching Emily, the name. Everyone whispered, quickly and quietly. The school library offered little information, but in an old yearbook, Lena found a class photo from 1989. In the back row on the right, a long-haired, black-haired girl smiled faintly, her gaze seeming to look directly at Lena. Below the photo was written, Emily Carter. Lena brought the photo to her room and placed it on her desk. That night, she stayed awake, staring at it under the desk lamp. At midnight, a small streak of water appeared on the photo, running from Emily's hair down the frame. Lena wiped it, but her fingers met a cold, damp sensation as if touching real hair. The next day, Lena asked a few older teachers. An English teacher looked around before answering. She said Emily had been an excellent student but was discovered to be pregnant, leading to social rejection and leaving school mid-term. A month later, she was found in room 304, dead by hanging. From then on, the room was permanently locked. In the following nights, Lena repeatedly dreamt she sat at the last desk in room 304, while Emily sat at the teacher's desk, back turned, murmuring something. Each time Lena tried to listen, 3 knocks echoed, waking her. She began keeping a journal, recording dreams, accidental footsteps, and dripping sounds in the hallway. But the more she wrote, the stranger events became. Once, the words "stay with me" appeared in the journal, wet and smudged. Lena didn't remember writing them. Mia noticed her friends change, but Lena avoided answering questions. Deep down, she felt an invisible thread pulling her toward room 304, stronger each day. Whenever she was away from the West Wing, her heart raced, as if something called her back. Then, one rainy night, Lena heard the 3 knocks clearly outside the dorm room door. The knocks were slow, deliberate, and even Lena sat frozen on her bed, heart pounding. The room was dark, lit only by her laptop screen. Mia had gone home for the weekend, leaving Lena alone. She stepped off the bed, tiptoeing to the door. Number 1 answered when she asked who it was, but as Lena touched the doorknob, a blast of cold air swept through, making her hairs stand on end. She turned the knob, opened the door, and saw an empty hallway. Rainwater still fell outside the window, at the end of the corridor, reflecting the pale yellow light. When Lena turned back, her heart sank. On the desk appeared an object that had definitely not been there before. An old dark brown leather notebook, rusted lock intact. Embossed on the cover was the name Emily Carter. Lena's hands trembled as she opened it. The first page contained neat handwriting. Day 1, they wouldn't listen. Day 2, they abandoned me. Day 3, I will go nowhere. The following pages were filled with fragmented diary entries, smeared ink as if wet. The more Lena read, the more she felt a soft breath on the back of her neck. She spun around, but no one was there. Suddenly, the mirror on her desk reflected a figure behind her, long black hair, soaked white uniform. Lena turned quickly, empty room. But in the mirror, the figure remained, inching closer, deep black eyes staring straight at her. The desk lamp flickered, then went out. In the darkness, Lena heard slow footsteps approaching, water dripping rhythmically. Onto the floor, she pressed herself against the wall, clutching the notebook. A freezing hand touched her shoulder. A soft voice whispered into her ear, "Now you can't go anywhere." When the light returned, Lena stood alone in the room. Wet footprints led from the door to where she stood, then disappeared. After that night, Lena could no longer distinguish dream from reality. Sitting in class, she suddenly realized she was in the West Wing hallway, holding Emily's notebook. Upon waking, she was back at her desk, but the damp, cold sensation from the dream lingered. She began losing sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, Lena saw herself slowly stepping toward room 304. Emily's hand always reached through the crack, beckoning, while a voice whispered incomprehensible words in her ear. Her body felt controlled, unable to stop. On the third day, friends found Lena standing before the West Wing at 3 a.m., wearing pajamas, barefoot, soaked in rain. She had no memory of leaving the dorm. Mia tried to persuade her to take a few days off and go home, but Lena refused. She felt if she left, something would come for her and pull her back worse. A strange compulsion rose within her. She had to uncover Emily's full story, even if it meant entering room 304. Emily's notebook began to change. First, the handwriting shifted. Then scribbled drawings appeared, depicting the classroom, desks, windows, and a figure hanging mid-air. On the final page, new words were written in red ink. "Tomorrow, we will meet." That night, the 3 knocks came repeatedly from the West Wing, even as the storm raged outside. Unable to resist, Lena grabbed a flashlight, tucked the notebook into her jacket, and left her room. Near the West Wing, she realized all locks were open. The long corridor was dark, water dripping from the ceiling in streaks across the floor. Room 304's door was ajar, faint pale blue light glowing inside. Her footsteps echoed on the tiles, slowing as she approached the threshold. A figure stood inside, back turned, hair covering its face, uniform soaked and clinging. The familiar voice spoke, clearer this time. "Come in, Lena." She stepped over the threshold. The air was thick with mold and rust. The pale blue light, source unknown, made everything appear submerged. Dust-covered desks surrounded her, and in the center of the room, a rope hung, the end twisted slightly, swaying. The door behind Lena clicked shut. She turned, but no doorknob was there, only a cracked old wall. The sensation of being trapped overwhelmed her. Emily remained in the corner. Back to Lena, long black hair clung wetly, droplets forming dark rings on the floor. Lena tried to step back, but her feet would not obey. Each step closer made her heart race, not from fear, but a strange force pulling her forward. Emily slowly turned. Deep black eyes, no whites, fixed on Lena. A thin smile revealed gray teeth. Her voice echoed across the room, lips barely moving. "You've arrived." The room suddenly changed. Desks vanished. The floor became icy water. Lena stood in an endless space, surrounded by dozens of whispering voices. Shadowy figures emerged beneath the water, eyes wide, mouths open, silent. Emily stepped closer, cold hand on Lena's cheek. "No one will abandon you here anymore." The rope descended from above, lightly wrapping around Lena's neck. She struggled, but her hands were held fast. The air thickened, her breath shallow. Suddenly, thunder cracked, and in a flash of lightning, Lena saw herself back in a normal classroom, but without any doors. Only Emily, the rope, and shadows creeping from the corners, swallowing everything. The darkness in room 304 swallowed all light. Lena felt weightless, as if the floor beneath her had vanished. Whispers swirled around her, overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Yet through it all, Emily's voice remained clear and intimate. "Just one more step, and you'll never have to go back there." The rope slid around Lena's neck, but instead of pain, she felt a strange warmth, as if someone was holding her. Memories of school days, pressures, loneliness, and anxiety faded, replaced by a deadly calm. The pale blue light beneath her flared, revealing dozens of faces staring up from the water below. All wore old uniforms, their skin pale, eyes hollow. They reached toward Lena, beckoning her to join them. Emily stepped back, treading across the water without creating ripples. "They understand you. Here, no one judges, no one abandons, only us." She extended her hand, waiting for Lena to take it. For a moment, Lena wanted to turn away, to escape. But when she looked into those deep black eyes, all resistance melted. She stepped toward Emily, her feet sinking into the icy water. The whispers around her became a mournful chorus. When Lena's hand touched Emily's, the room shook violently. A dry, sharp crack echoed, and the light vanished. The next morning, Mia returned to the dorm to find Lena missing. The door was locked from the inside. When forced open, the room was completely empty except for an old dark brown notebook on the desk. The last page, in shaky handwriting, read, "Day 1, they wouldn't listen. Day 2, they abandoned me. Day 3, I will go nowhere. Day 4, Lena is here. Report from Lincoln High School Administration, Seattle, Washington, in November 12th. After Lena Thompson disappeared, the administration sealed off the entire West Wing. Room 304's entrance was locked permanently. Maintenance staff and teachers confirmed no sign of forced entry or any object inside, except for the old dark brown notebook. Students and teachers described strange phenomena near the West Wing. 3 knocks echoed at unusual hours when no one was in the hall. Shadows of a long-haired female student appeared in the window of the locked room, even though security cameras recorded nothing. Some students reported seeing small rivulets of water running from the floor up the walls, disappearing when approached. Testimony of Mia Harper, Lena's classmate. I can still hear those knocks on rainy nights. Every time I stand near room 304, my heart races, even though I know no one is inside. Lena said she felt like someone was calling her, and the last time I saw her, she was moving toward the door with a blank stare. I'll never forget that feeling. Journal of the school newspaper club. Noah Bennett, Lena Thompson and Emily Carter have now become part of the West Wing. I've looked at the notebook and seen new lines appear each day. Even when no one touches it, no one dares enter that room, but anyone walking past hears the knocks, a reminder that they are still here. The room is not just Emily's memory, it holds the souls of those who never returned. Room 304 remains locked. All attempts to break or repair the lock are futile. New students are warned to stay away from the West Wing, yet on rainy nights, the 3 knocks echo steadily, drawing those who hear them toward the locked door, as if the curse has never lifted. In the Misty Sea region of Shimane Prefecture, an ancient curse still haunts the people across generations. The curse of the Hanayome bride, who mysteriously vanished on her wedding day, leaving behind wandering ghosts along the cold shoreline. Ryu Hayato, a passionate investigative reporter, decides to confront the truth behind the strange disappearances and the chilling rumors of the ghostly bride dressed in white kimono. But the deeper he digs, the more the ghostly figure emerges, not only in legends but haunts his present life, dragging him into a deadly spiral full of mystery and sorrow. Can Ryoichi unravel this dark curse, or will he become the next victim caught in the relentless grip of vengeful spirits? Follow along to discover The Bride's Curse, a horror story not meant for the faint of heart. Tonight, the coastal road is darker than usual. Thick clouds press against the water like a black blanket, leaving only a few narrow gaps to let through the pale moonlight. Waves crash violently against the sheer cliffs, spraying white foam like thousands of giant hands trying to climb up. From the deep, Ryoichi Hayato sits behind the steering wheel, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the window. The car glides along the narrow road, mountains on the left, and a steep drop down to the sea on the right. The clock shows nearly 1 a.m., and he has been driving continuously for 5 hours from Tokyo back to Shimane, a coastal prefecture currently plagued by a series of strange disappearances, only vaguely reported by the press. The headlights sweep across sharp bends, reflecting corroded signs warning beware of high waves. Occasionally, the sea wind howls like someone screaming in the night, causing Ryoichi to grip the wheel tighter. Suddenly, he freezes. Right ahead, on the dark roadside, a figure appears, a girl in a white kimono, her long black hair soaking wet, holding a faded bridal bouquet. Ryoichi slams the brakes, heart pounding. The girl stands motionless, head bowed, the wet kimono clinging to her as if she just stepped out from the depths of the sea. He lowers the window and softly asks, "Miss... do you need help?" No answer. The sea breeze blows her hair aside, revealing half of her ghostly pale face and bluish lips. Just as Ryoichi opens the door to step out, the headlights glare against a sudden thick fog rolling in. A moment later, the spot where she stood is completely empty. His heart races wildly. He scans around, but the deserted road offers only the sound of waves and wind. He gets back into the car, tries to calm himself, and drives a few more kilometers until he spots an old inn by the road. Its grey-tiled roof, covered in moss. The innkeeper is a thin old woman, her eyes deep and cold as if she has seen too much. When Ryoichi tells her about the girl in the white kimono, she falls silent for a moment, then quietly asks, "Did you drive past the stretch near the rocky cape?" Ryoichi nods. She sighs, lights a cigarette, the thin smoke drifting across her deeply wrinkled face. People call her Haniome, the bride of the sea. Anyone who sees her, sooner or later, gets taken away. Ryoichi swallows hard, feeling the cold from the sea still clang to his skin. The old woman leans in, whispering, "If you really want to know, don't expect to come back safe. This curse... No one has ever escaped." He sits frozen as the waves pound outside, like the rhythm of a wedding ceremony deep beneath the sea. Ryoichi tosses and turns all night. The sound of crashing waves echoes into his room like relentless pounding on the door. Every time he closes his eyes, the image of the girl in the white kimono appears clearly, her wet hair sticking to her cheek, eyes as dark and deep as if pulling him down to the abyss. At dawn, he leaves the inn, determined to find the rocky cape where he saw her. The old innkeeper stands silently on the porch, handing him an old paper talisman. Its faded characters, barely visible. "Keep it, but don't think it will save you," she says, then turns back inside. The morning path to the cape is eerily quiet. Golden sunlight glistens on the waves, seagulls cry and circle. But Ryoichi knows that beneath this peaceful scene, the sea hides something that should not exist. At the bend where he saw the girl last night, he stops. Wet footprints are faintly imprinted on the gravelly soil, stretching toward the cliff's edge. He kneels to look closer and realizes the footprints disappear halfway, as if the person vanished into thin air. While observing, he hears a vague sound behind him. He turns, no one. But on the road lies a faded bridal bouquet, identical to the one the girl held last night. Before he can touch it, a sudden gust of wind blows, sweeping the bouquet off the cliff. Sensing something is wrong, Ryoichi searches for a way down to the rocky beach beneath the cape. The path is narrow, slippery with seaweed and spray. When he reaches the bottom, he freezes. Among the wet rocks, there is a small wooden altar placed near the water's edge. On it sits a faded portrait of a young girl in a white kimono, her deep black eyes staring straight at him. The photo is aged, but the face is unmistakable. It's the girl he saw. Next to the photo are scattered drifted objects, a rusted wedding ring, torn veil, and crumbling invitation cards, all damp and cold, exuding the sharp briny smell of the sea. Ryoichi shudders, turning to leave, but then notices new wet footprints on the sand, just behind him, leading straight toward him. Ryoichi froze, heart pounding fiercely. The wet footprints were clearly imprinted on the sand, step by step, drawing closer, yet all around him was utterly empty. No footsteps, no breathing, only the sound of waves crashing against the rocks, like distant funeral drums. He stepped back, but the footprints kept appearing, as if they were walking right behind him. Suddenly, Ryoichi spun around. Nothing. Only the biting cold sea breeze brushed his face. Turning again, he found the altar. Before him had changed. The bridal bouquet he'd seen fall into the abyss now lay fresh atop it, as if just picked in the photograph. The girl's eyes shimmered brighter, her lips curling into a faint smile. A drop of water fell onto his palm. Ryoichi looked up. It wasn't rain. It was water dripping from the soaking wet hair of the girl in the white kimono standing right beside him. He heard no footsteps, no rustle of fabric, only her silently bowing head as her lips parted, seeming to want to speak. "Return." Her voice echoed from the depths of the water, choked but full of hatred. "Return everything." Ryoichi stumbled back a step but caught himself on a rock, nearly falling into the sea. His voice trembled as he asked, "Who? Who are you?" She said nothing, only stretched out her hand. Her thin, icy finger touched the chest of his shirt right over the talisman the innkeeper had given him. Instantly, a piercing scream rang out. The sea churned violently, and the talisman on his chest burned and smoldered. The girl vanished, leaving behind an empty space and a chill that seeped deep into his bones. Ryoichi gasped for breath, feeling as if he had just escaped something horrific. But as he turned to leave, he suddenly noticed the wet footprints continued to mark the sand, walking parallel to his own steps. He no longer dared to look back. Ryoichi returned to the inn as dusk fell. The corridor was silent, the yellow lights flickering weakly as if about to die. The old innkeeper sat by the window, her deeply wrinkled eyes fixed on him for a long moment without speaking. "The talisman," she said slowly. "You tore it." Ryoichi bent down, pulling the burnt, charred piece of paper from his shirt pocket. "You know what's happening to me, don't you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she drew the curtain closed, locked the door bolts tightly, then sat facing him. "Here, they call her Hana no Yurei, the ghost bride. More than 20 years ago, a girl was abandoned on her wedding day. The groom disappeared, leaving her waiting by this very seaside. They say she jumped into the water during a heavy rainstorm, still wearing her white kimono and clutching her bridal bouquet. Since then, whenever the sea mists rise, she returns to find those who bear the shadow of her groom." Ryoichi swallowed hard. "But I don't know her." The old woman tilted her head. "You don't need to know her. She only needs to choose you." Outside, the waves suddenly grew louder, pounding the cliffs like thousands of hands banging on a door. The ceiling light flickered repeatedly. The old woman quickly stood and pressed a small wooden box into Ryoki's hand. "Tonight, you must lock your door and not open it, no matter what you hear. Don't go outside, and don't let her see your eyes again." Ryoichi accepted the box, feeling a coldness spread through his palm. He opened it. Inside was a small, round mirror with a dulled silver frame. "What's this for?" he asked. She paused, looking straight into his eyes, her voice deepening. "To help you know if what stands behind you is real or not." That night, sitting alone in his room, the sea began to roar. The knocking on the door started soft, then grew louder. He gripped the mirror tightly but dared not look into it. At the 30th knock, he heard the familiar whisper, "Return, everything." He squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them, the mirror was fogged with moisture, reflecting behind him a figure in white kimono, dripping wet hair falling onto the floor. "Ryoich." I single quotes as pounding heart thundered in his ears, merging with the relentless crashing of the distant sea. He whipped around. The room was empty. The mirror in his hand felt ice cold, as if soaked in ice. He placed it on the table, trying to calm himself, but slow footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Don't open the door. Don't meet her gaze." The innkeeper's words tightened around his mind like a noose. The steps stopped right outside his room. A suffocating silence stretched. Then a metallic scrape. Someone was inserting a key into the lock. Ryoichi stepped back, clutching the wooden box. The door didn't open, but the gap under it darkened, as if something blocked the light outside. Then, a pale, ghostly hand with long, sharp nails slowly slipped through the crack, scratching the wood with a screech. A salty, fishy stench flooded his nostrils, mixed with the scent of withered flowers. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "You left me, alone." Ryoichi pressed himself against the wall, but the mirror on the table trembled, turning its glass face toward the door. He glanced briefly and saw reflected in it a face veiled in dripping wet hair, pressed close to the floor, eyes white and wild, staring directly at him. The seawater began to seep in under the door, flooding the floor. Icy cold to the bone, he screamed and lunged to cover the mirror. When he looked up, the door was slightly ajar. A wet swath of white kimono peeked through, drops falling onto the wooden floor, disappearing into the darkness. Without thinking, Ryoichi grabbed the wooden box and rushed into the hallway, but it was no longer as before. The dim lights blurred into endless corridors, and at the far end stood a white bride, clutching a drenched bouquet. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her lips curled slightly, and the overhead light suddenly went out. Everything sank into a thick darkness. Ryoichi could only hear water dripping steadily, like the ticking countdown of a clock. The damp, cold, and musty smell surrounded him, making it hard to breathe. As his eyes gradually adjusted, he realized the hallway had vanished. Instead, he stood in a dense black void. The floor beneath his feet felt soft and sinking like wet mud. Each step pressed down, cold water seeping up to his ankles. Ahead, a faint white light flickered like a candle in the wind. He moved closer, saw a floating altar drifting on the black water. On it lay a yellowed wedding photo, but the groom's face was torn away, leaving only the bride staring directly at him. The eyes in the picture weren't still. They blinked softly. Behind the photo, something stirred. A pale white hand slowly reached out, nails scratching the wooden frame, producing a chilling screech. Ryoichi stepped back, but the water suddenly rippled from below. Dozens of icy hands grabbed his legs, pulling him down. He struggled, trying to break free, but every pull grew stronger. From the darkness came the bride's voice, gentle yet chilling to the bone. "You will stay with me forever." A face soaked with black hair surfaced right beside him. Its eyes were wild and white, mouth unnaturally wide open, revealing sharp, pointed teeth. Her breath was salty, mixed with the stench of decay. Ryoichi screamed, raised the wooden box over his head, and slammed it down hard on the water's surface. A red flash burst out, and the hands vanished. He immediately surged out of the water, but when he looked around, there was no altar, no darkness. He was lying on the floor of his inn room, soaking wet, as if just pulled from the sea. The door remained tightly closed. Outside, there was absolute silence, but right on the wooden box in his hand, a faint wet handprint had appeared, etched clearly with 5 fingers. Ryoichi sat frozen on the inn's floor, clutching the wooden box as if it were the only lifeline keeping him from the abyss. Sweat and seawater still clung to his skin, but he couldn't shake the cold dread crawling down his spine. The next day, he went to the local police station and met Kenji, a young officer with a serious demeanor and skeptical eyes. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Kenji asked as Ryoichi recounted his experiences. "If I didn't, why would I be here?" Ryoichi answered, his voice low and weary. Kenji shook his head, saying the disappearances might be due to kidnappers or local criminals. But when Ryoichi showed him the video footage capturing Hiroshi's disappearance on the coastal road, Kenji couldn't deny something was off. Together, they set out to search the dangerous stretch of road. As night fell and thick fog enveloped the area, Kenji suddenly spotted a white figure darting along the roadside, smelling of wilted flowers and strong seawater. He quickly called Ryoichi back. "That, the girl in the white kimono. I saw her." At that moment, a piercing scream echoed from the cliff's edge. They rushed over and found wet footprints leading to the water, but no one was there. Ryoichi knew this was no ordinary ghost story. The Hanayome curse was spreading, and anyone could be the next victim. The sky was grey and heavy, a drizzle making the coastal road even colder. Ryoichi stood before the door of Itsuko, the old woman reputed to be the only one who truly understood the Hanayome legend. She greeted him with sharp, cold eyes, holding an ancient Ofuda yellowed paper inscribed with archaic characters. "You need this to block the curse, but it can only be used once. Abuse it, and the consequences will be dire." Ryoichi took the Ofuda, feeling the latent power within. "What should I do next?" Itsuko replied. "To break the curse, you must find the hair comb Sayaka used on her wedding day. The comb holds her soul and power. Bury it where she died, and it will soothe her rage." As Ryoichi pondered, Sayaka's image appeared in his mind, her face now identical to Yui, his missing sister. The pain and confusion weighed heavily on his chest. "My sister, is she involved?" Itsuko fell silent, eyes seeming to speak volumes. She wouldn't say aloud, "Be careful. This curse is not just a simple ghost story. It carries many more painful secrets than you imagine." Ryoichi steeled himself to begin the search for the hair comb, knowing the journey might cost him far more than his life. Ryoichi walked along the coastline, waiting for the tide to recede before he could see the entrance to a small cave hidden beneath the cliff face. The cave lay deep within Moscovite crevices, only visible when the water pulled back. He crawled. Inside, the space was cold and damp, with the distant crashing of waves echoing like the voices of lost spirits. The weak beam of his flashlight highlighted the mossy, wet stone walls deep within the cave. Ryoichi discovered a small altar made of stone and rotten wood. On it rested an old hair comb adorned with intricate patterns, a torn white kimono, and several wedding items faded with time. As soon as his hand touched the comb, a cold gust blew through like the sea's sigh, accompanied by soft, mournful cries resonating throughout the cave. Ryoichi closed his eyes, feeling the ocean water creeping in around him, the roar of the waves ringing in his ears as if dragging him deeper down. He tried to stay calm, but the image of Sayaka appeared clearly in his mind, her sorrowful face, eyes filled with hatred. Ryoichi knew this was more than a keepsake. It was the key to freeing the curse, or to being trapped forever in the depths of the sea. Ryoichi stood inside the cave, the faint flashlight beam reflecting off the damp rock walls. The hair comb in his hand was icy cold, as if it held Sayaka's very soul. Suddenly, everything around him twisted strangely, the space seeming to melt away, the stone walls growing hazy. He He was drawn into a vivid hallucination, a vision of an ancient wedding, but not an ordinary one. The guests were all ghosts, pale faces with hollow eyes. The laughter and music carried a dark, ominous tone. Sayaka appeared, wearing a pure white kimono, slowly stepping toward Ryoichi. Her long flowing hair cascaded down, her face both beautiful and cold, eyes deep and black as if pulling him into an abyss. She came close, whispering coldly, "Promise me, you'll stay with me forever." Ryoichi felt a powerful pull, an irresistible compulsion, as if bound by an invisible vow. He wanted to resist, but his body stiffened, words caught in his throat. Around him, the ghosts drew nearer, their hands reaching out to grab him, pulling him down into the cold ocean depths. In the most desperate moment, a voice echoed from afar, "Ryoichi, don't forget yourself." It was Kenji, trying to drag him back from the terrifying vision. Kenji burst into the cave, holding high the ancient Ofuda, its archaic characters glowing brightly in the dim darkness. He shouted, "Ryoichi, listen to me." An invisible force seemed to spread through the air, causing the ghosts at the dark wedding to begin dissolving. Their eerie laughter turned to pained screams before fading to silence. Sayaka glanced at Kenji with eyes full of hatred but also fear. She lunged toward Ryoichi, trying to hold him back from the Ofuda. Kenji hurriedly pressed the Ofuda against Sayaka's forehead. Light flared violently. The cave shook as if about to collapse. The seawater slowly crept in, ghostly hands rising. To resist, Ryoichi placed the hair comb on the ground and recited the prayer as instructed by the old woman, Itsuko. His voice echoed amidst the roaring waves and howling wind. A dazzling white light burst forth, engulfing the space. The curse gradually lifted. Sayaka and the other ghosts vanished, leaving an eerie stillness in the cave. Kenji and Ryoichi staggered out just in time as the tide rose, slowly submerging the cave entrance. Ryoichi awoke on the wet sand beneath the weak morning sunlight. Gentle waves lapped the shore. The wind whispered softly through the trees like a tender lullaby. Beside him, Kenji lay unconscious, scratched but alive. No trace of the cave remained. No clue proving what had just happened was relaxed. The old hair comb still in Ryoki's jacket pocket. Back in town, life returned to normal. But a week later, Ryoichi received an unmarked envelope. Inside was an old wedding invitation. The paper yellowed with age, written in delicate script. Invitation to the wedding of Sayaka and Ryoichi. His heart raced, a cold shiver rising. He tore the invitation in half and looked out the window. The figure of the girl in the white kimono appeared, standing there, smiling gently but mysteriously, as if waiting for him to answer the vow from long ago. The story ends with a feeling of closure, yet opening a new, endless loop, preserving the haunting mystery of the Hanayome. Bride's Curse. Thank you for accompanying me on the journey through The Bride's Curse, a tale woven with mystery, painful pasts, and a haunting supernatural world. If you love chilling, ghost stories and terrifying legends blended with spiritual elements, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss upcoming episodes and many other fascinating stories. Please share your thoughts about the story in the comments and share to spread this mysterious fear with everyone. See you again in future stories where every shadow hides a secret yet to be uncovered.
Thank you for following.